Minso kneels among fallen bodies in a ruined hall, surrounded by a glowing magical dome. Minso, wounded, kneels down and asks for survivors to respond if there are any. The wounded and dead lie on the battlefield, and a voice warns that if you can't talk, you need to move or make a sound. Minso asks for help while in the center of a glowing magic circle. An injured man with long white hair thoughtfully asks if he is the only one in his situation. The image shows a man with long dark hair and horns against a red and black background, looking forward with a confident expression. Amidst the fire and destruction, a figure with long dark hair raises his hand as other characters with weapons and a baby watch the chaos around them. The image shows a decorative pattern with the inscription, "The High Priest," on a dark background. In a terrifying scene, a creature with sharp teeth threatens a crying child, causing him to feel fear and despair. Minso utters mysterious words, accompanied by a glowing magical symbol against the night sky. A child in a jumpsuit falls into a bright blue energy field, surrounded by an explosion of light and movement. Sage and Minso use magic to create a glowing vortex around the baby against the backdrop of fire and enemy shadows. Minso raises his arms, creating a glowing green dome in which a small creature in a suit cries. A man with long blonde hair stands in front, surrounded by mages in white robes with hoods ready to follow him. The image shows a magical seal with the inscription, "Put everything on the line," creating an atmosphere of a decisive moment. Sage says with determination that she is doing this for the future of humanity, emitting powerful energy from her hands. Minso creates a protective field reflecting the powerful attack, while Sage advances with his sword, surrounded by dark energy. Minso announces the date and time, confirming the death of the High Priest as he listens to her against the backdrop of the starry sky. A character with green hair and horns says the name Edna, introducing herself as the last dragon and an observer recording history. Minso asks Sage for good news against the backdrop of the starry sky and destruction around them. He coughs, covering his mouth with his hand, and there are traces of blood on his clothes. The image shows a hand with a bloodstain on the palm against a dark red background. Sage looks at the blood on his hand with an expression of pain and thoughtfulness. A character with green hair and horns laughs quietly, covering his face with his hand against a starry sky. She looks thoughtfully to the side against the backdrop of the starry sky, preparing to say something. Minso, sitting on the ground with a sword, begins to speak, and he stands nearby, looking at the starry sky. He says with his eyes closed that of course it should be like that. Minso stands among the flowers, addressing 3 retreating figures who are running towards her across the field. 4 characters smile and exchange a bouquet of flowers in a warm, friendly atmosphere. Against the backdrop of the starry sky, he sits with a sword on his back, wounded and tired, looking up. He covers his face with his hand, blood flows from his mouth and clothes. A sword is visible against the starry sky. Against the backdrop of a starry sky, the death of the master of the magical tower of the White Tower, Oscar Sage, is confirmed. There's a pen in a stand on the table, an inkwell stands next to it, and a green leaf slowly descends over the paper. On an old sheet of paper lies a green leaf with shadows and barely discernible symbols around it. The image shows a tall Gothic tower surrounded by greenery and a city in the background. Sage is lying on the bed with a surprised expression, while Minso is standing by the window with a tray in his hands, watching him. Sage is lying in bed. A leaf is lying on his hand, slightly moving. Sage jerks his hand away, noticing something unexpected. Sage jerks his hand away, trying to hold onto the bowl of water that is starting to spill. Sage, visibly irritated, looks at Minso, who sits calmly across from him, and says something. Sage places the golden casket on the table and says something to the man in the white shirt standing next to him. Sage reflects on his vulnerability and finds it important. He thinks he should have died, looking at his hand with a bright red heart. Sage stabs Minso with his sword, and he feels the wound in his chest with a pained expression. Sage has his back turned when suddenly there is a loud explosion or impact near him. Sage notices with alarm that what used to be a door is now engulfed in flames. Sage, engulfed in bright flames, threatens to make a man out of his opponent, grabbing him by the shoulders in a tense fight. The image shows a man speaking with irritation, expressing displeasure, while part of another man's head with blue hair is visible nearby. Sage sits on the bed and Minso asks anxiously what happened. Man with brightly glowing eye, expressing anger and tension against red light and sound effect. Sage screams furiously that someone has completely lost their mind and waves his hand. Sage notices the attack and assumes it is an assassin sent by demons. The image shows the magic spell Windshield, with the explanation that the wind instantly forms a shield that blocks the hand. A hand pierces a glowing shield with force, accompanied by an inscription that the wrist that meets the wind will bend like straw. Minso thinks that he is a low-level rookie who didn't even think about preparing before attacking. Sage raises his hand, creating a glowing protective barrier around himself. Sage notices that the windshield disappears when his hand touches the invisible barrier. Sage looks at her hands with concern, feeling very nervous and confused. Sage rolls up his sleeve with his eyes closed, preparing for action. Sage stands with his back to the entrance, and another man with blue hair walks in behind him, unnoticed. He screams in shock that someone has gone crazy, noticing that his windshield disappeared immediately after use. Sage clenches his fists, expressing dissatisfaction with his magical abilities and doubting that this is really his body. Someone panics and asks what happened to his body. Sage, looking out the window, said that no more than a day had passed. Sage asks about the traitors and mentions an informal way of dealing with them while standing by the window in the room. He is surprised to notice that there is no air movement around the other person and doubts that he is lying. He touches his head in surprise while the other man sits silently next to him. Minso thinks some people have incredible imaginations and asks why he is so angry with young Oscar Sage. Sage stands by the window, watching Minso, who has her back turned to him, creating a tense atmosphere between them. Sage looks out the window thoughtfully, his face expressing slight anxiety and concentration. Sage places his hand on his chest, expressing inner excitement or tension. Sage clutches his head in panic and looks ahead anxiously, sweating and appears anxious. Sage sits in a chair and looks ahead intently, as if waiting or thinking about something important. The illuminated building in the background suggests that the city has developed greatly. Two women walk under street lamps, and a man and a girl meet another woman at a carriage, thinking about the glowing street lamps. The image shows a man and woman smiling while he holds a baby, and the voiceover says that it's all thanks to a revolution in magical engineering. Sage smiles thoughtfully and thinks that others would really enjoy seeing this. The image shows a hand-touching glass with a circle effect against a backdrop of blurred city lights and text about a world that was falling apart. Sage suggests stopping the reminiscences by addressing the interlocutor with a serious expression on his face. Sage sits in a chair with her legs crossed and her hands folded in her lap, waiting or thinking. Sage crosses his arms in concentration, a magical symbol glowing around him, creating an atmosphere of intense concentration. The image shows a bottle of red liquid against a background with red vertical lines, creating a tense atmosphere. Sage explains that success would increase the amount of mana several times, but failure could put life at risk, so it is prohibited by law. Sage sits in a chair with his eyes closed and reflects on what Frank told him, that he had been unconscious all day after taking something. Sage looks at the glowing energy in his hands in surprise and asks if this is what he thinks it is. Sage looks at pure mana and marvels that it comes from a cheap illegal elixir, noting the wonder of modern society. Sage concentrates on releasing a blast of energy from his chest, causing his arm and shirt to become covered in blue cracks and stains. The image shows the moment black liquid suddenly splashes upwards, accompanied by blurred lines and a sound effect. Sage says "this" in surprise as he looks at the small figure lying on the floor. Sage looks at his hand with alarm, noticing something unusual. Sage looks at his open palm with a slight smile, as if expecting something important. Sage looks at the glowing bottle and addresses it without saying a word out loud. The image shows a sparkling crystal vessel on a table in a room with columns in the background. Sage muses that given the amount of poison remaining and the time of the collapse, he is certain that the death was not caused by a mana surge. The image shows a red explosion with the text "but from poison" on a black background, with no characters visible. Sage smiles reservedly and clenches his fist, preparing for an important action. Sage stands up from his chair in the bookcase room, his movements looking determined. Sage carefully picks up an elegant bottle of liquid sitting on the table. Sage holds a bottle with his face inside, looking at it thoughtfully. Sage approaches Oscar Crushin and promises revenge for him, lending him his body. On the outskirts of Siren, a large house with illuminated windows is visible, inside which someone is talking. The man expresses dissatisfaction and says that he is not going to tolerate such treatment. Two men react with fear and tension to an unexpected event, expressing shock and alarm. Sage enters the room and is surprised to hear the name Oscar Crushin. Sage looks thoughtfully into the distance, lost in thought under the night sky. Sage attacks with a swift motion, slashing downwards with his sword aimed at his opponent. Sage sits relaxed with a bottle, watching as someone slams a hammer on the floor in front of him. The image shows the title Wind Cutter against a light pattern background with no visible characters. Sage used magic to throw the attacker back, who fell to the floor surrounded by glowing streams of energy. Sage takes a strong blow to the back, causing blood to flow and a sharp sound of pain to be heard. Sage stands confidently next to the body on the floor, and the worried man tries to say something or stop him. A man with a tense expression on his face fires a pistol, pointing the weapon straight ahead. The image shows a fast and powerful shot with multiple explosions and gunshot sounds, but no characters are visible. Sage smiles and raises her hand slightly, as if about to say or do something. Sage activates the defensive spell Windshield, reflecting the incoming bullet. He touches his lips with his finger and starts to say that no. Text breaks off. Sage confidently reflects bullets, creating a protective glow around itself. Sage uses magic to fire glowing projectiles towards the man, who screams in terror. A man with a revolver is hit several times, screaming in pain and trying to defend himself. Sage is lying on the floor with a pained expression, a foot under his face, pinning him to the ground. Sage stands leaning against the couch, her foot pinning a man on the floor who is groaning in pain. Sage sits on the couch and says something with a slight tiredness in his voice. He gets kicked hard in the face and makes a sound of pain. Sage looks forward in surprise, holding out his hand with smoke coming from it against a red light. Sage gets punched in the face, his eyes wide in surprise and pain. Sage falls to the floor with wounds and blood, experiencing severe pain. Sage explained that if he did this, it would become too noisy. Sage, crying and shaking, clings to the leg of another man standing underneath. Sage, sitting, demanded to tell everything she knew about her patron. A mysterious man in a dark cloak holds a vial of liquid, hiding his face in the shadow of his hood. Sage speculates that this was probably a ploy to deceive the man. Sage looks worried and says something to someone off camera. An injured man with blood on his clothes leans on his knee in pain and fatigue. Sage sits in a chair watching the man with the bottle, who remains silent, and a tense atmosphere hangs around them. Sage hands Minso several folders of documents, and she accepts them carefully. Sage reads several documents carefully, concentrating on the information in front of him. The image shows a tall magic tower with text explaining its history and the problems associated with the lack of advanced magic, and an important announcement from the imperial family. Sage muses that the White Tower does not have advanced magic and decides to look into the matter separately. With lightning in the background, it is said that the Yellow Tower of the East, which controls lightning, ushered in an era of great magical engineering. Sage and Minso stand in front of a glowing magical symbol against a city backdrop at night, discussing their contributions to revolutionary items such as street lamps and automobiles. The image shows a blue symbol and potion bottles against a background of water, accompanied by text about the Southern Blue Tower and its contributions to water, agriculture, and potions. A symbol appears in the desert against the backdrop of a burning red sword, accompanied by text about joining the military and participating in missions to conquer monsters. Sage sits with a folder of documents, studying them carefully, while another man looks at him from behind. Sage, covering his face with his hand, experiences severe tension or pain while sitting at a table with an open book in front of him. Against the backdrop of a bright sky with clouds and sun, it is said that the White Tower's mages fly high and rule the sky, symbolizing freedom and courage. Sage covered his face with his hand, emitting a dark aura, causing the other man to become frightened and recoil. Sage speaks thoughtfully, asking a question, expressing concern or confusion. Sage reflects on how the White Tower was a major player in the potion market 20 years ago and laments the burning of their methods of creation. Sage stands with a document in his hands, and another man sits on the floor in a room with bloodstains, discussing what is happening. Sage says something serious, expressing concern or determination. Sage sighs in annoyance and waves his hand, while the man opposite sweats and gets nervous. Sage sits on the couch, focused on flipping through a book. Sage stands at the window, complaining, while a wounded man with blood on his clothes calls him Sir Oscar in a panic. Sage silently looks out the window, where a silhouette is visible beyond the balcony, and a bottle of champagne sits on the table. Sage stands outside the mansion at night, holding a bag and a book, looking thoughtfully ahead. A huge glowing tower rises against the night sky, surrounded by city buildings. Sage cautiously enters the room through the door, expressing displeasure. Sage slowly gets up from his chair and reaches for the objects on the table, studying them intently. Sage wonders thoughtfully if he will be able to use that magic in his current state. Sage creates a magical vortex of wind in his palm, accompanied by the inscription, Wind Archive. Sage raises his hand in concentration, with glowing streams of energy swirling around it. Sage sits in a chair and looks closely at the glowing object in his hand, studying it with concentration. Sage reads the book carefully, concentrating on studying its contents. A sign appears against the backdrop of the fire about the only survivor of the devastating fire in the mansion. A small girl stands in the center, surrounded by many hands reaching out to her, creating a sense of pressure and anxiety. In the classroom, the students are panicked and focused on their assignments, and the text tells us that he studied at a magic academy and always got only the highest grades. Sage reads his masterpiece dissertation, proving he is an undeniable genius, while the audience watches approvingly. Sage reads the book carefully, immersed in studying its contents. Someone asks in surprise about mana deficiency syndrome. Sage reads a book in surprise while standing in front of a table with another document on it. Sage holds a glowing blue ball in his hand, thinking about scanning it. Sage displays a holographic screen while delivering an important message to the person he's talking to. Minso is surprised that he doesn't have mana deficiency syndrome. Sage looks shocked and tense, as if he had just heard something unexpected or scary. The image shows a glowing magic circle with mysterious symbols in the background, with no visible characters. Minso smiles and gestures to talk in front of a building. Minso is surprised that he doesn't have mana deficiency syndrome. Sage looks in surprise at the glowing holographic screen with strange symbols in front of it. The image shows a glowing body with physical circuits, explaining that the number of circuits installed will determine their level. Sage stands up from his chair, preparing to act or speak. A knot in a rope is shown against a red light, accompanied by thoughts that the physical chain is not innately tangled, but was intentionally tied by someone. Sage muses that if that guy was a genius, he would know he didn't have mana deficiency syndrome. Sage drinks from a mug, thinking about Frank's words, while men chat and laugh in the background. A hand abruptly places a mug on the table, causing a splash of liquid and a loud sound. Minso is surprised that this was a personality he created on purpose. Sage sits at the table, leaning his elbow thoughtfully on his arm, and in his mind, he wonders why someone would deliberately act like a playboy. Sage, holding a stack of books, muses that if that's the case, he understands why someone would succumb to the temptation of an illegal elixir. Against a red background with chains, it says he had to untie the chains himself. Hands place several thick books on the table, with sheets of text scattered around. Sage studies books on a library table, leaning his hands on them in concentration. Sage flips through a book of notes and diagrams, carefully studying the information. The image shows text musing that the Windcutter's attack trajectory is too boring and needs to be improved. The image shows notes with magical symbols and text stating that Advanced Windshield can be used as an attack, and a weapon called a pistol is ideal for White Tower magic. The image shows a drawing of a pistol with circulating bullets and explanatory text about the use of this idea as a motive. Sage looks closely at the documents on his desk, trying to understand their contents. Sage reflects on how he couldn't use magic on his own. Sage reads a book and drinks from a cup at the same time, holding a pen in his hand. Minso places his hand on a book with mysterious symbols, reading out loud about a magician who... Sage carefully reads a book with incomprehensible symbols, studying the text intently. Sage reflects on having to do it alone. Sage lowered his head over the table, resting his hand on an open book, showing fatigue or thought. Sage walks across the room towards a chair against a light carpet and table. Sage sits down on the blue couch in the library, resting her hands on her knees and closing her eyes. Sage meditates as a glowing image appears behind him, promising to untie the knot he couldn't untie. Sage concentrates on creating a magical shield surrounded by glowing runes and energy. Sage clenches his fist, surrounded by energy, and resolutely orders that those who cruelly broke the wings be made to pay for it. A loud scream is heard in a bright greenhouse room with a fountain and flowers, but the characters in the frame are not visible. Sage stands by a fountain in a bright room with large windows and greenery around, looking thoughtfully ahead. Sage looks away, thinking intently, against a bright interior with green plants. Minso suggested that she sit and teach the lesson here, to which one of the students happily agreed. He holds a smoking pipe and asks if it is related to the curse of sleep. A man suffers from a rat curse in his sleep, which reminds him of his title as Viscount of the Nightmare Demon World. Sage muses out loud that the dreams of his students are not spoiled and are not emotional entertainment as they sit on the lawn with Minseo and the children. In front of the viewer stands a man with long white hair showing 4 fingers against a background of glowing symbols. A boy named Lloyd Schultz, 9 years old, says something in front of green plants. Little Shasha Maest asks about preferences in the type of magic. Minso stands in front of 3 children and explains something while holding a twig in her hand as they listen attentively. The boy with golden hair raised his hand happily, and the man with white hair smiled back. Minso draws on the grass with a twig, and another person's legs are visible nearby. She says there is no rush, and she agrees with that. The little girl asked if she and the master were the same, to which he replied in the affirmative, sitting next to 2 other figures against a backdrop of greenery. The little red-haired girl happily said that she liked it. Sage and the other boy each raise 1 finger in agreement. Sage smiles and speaks, and in his mind he sees a happy boy with his hands raised. The image shows 2 people. He looks in surprise at a glowing blue rose on his finger, and she turns to him with a smile. He asks if a decision has been made yet, holding a glowing blue flower. The image shows a man with long white hair smiling and touching his chin, expressing mild surprise or thoughtfulness. Minso speaks thoughtfully, and Sage listens attentively, expressing surprise. Sage reasons that special-type magic isn't so bad, turning to Minso, who smiles with her chin in her hands. Sage watches as 2 people interlock their little fingers, symbolizing a promise or bond between them. Sage stands in the rain with a slight smile, glowing particles flickering around him. Sage smiles wistfully, realizing that despite wanting to be an adult, he is still a child. Sage woke up and asked how long he had slept, after which he heard the order to go to Lab 4202. Sage steps out of the elevator, holding a book in his hand and looking down intently. He announces that he has reached level 2 and has increased his mana circuits by knocking on the door number 4202. Sage asks how he feels, addressing a man sitting at the table. Sage stands in front of a man at a desk who is reading a document and says he is glad to hear it. A man with blonde hair thoughtfully reads the document and remembers that Elder Maxim was his junior. Sage reflects on the honesty and diligence of another person, expecting a bright future from him. Sage recalls being called Master of the Magic Tower later, which he found funny as another man handed him the book. Sage smiles, touching his chin thoughtfully as the other man reads the document in front of him in surprise. Sage suddenly noticed something and expressed surprise. Sage listens in surprise as the other man firmly replies that he disagrees. Sage places the yellow paper on the table, making a soft sound. He is reading a yellow book carefully, visibly worried and with a bead of sweat on his face. Sage stands in front of a man with blonde hair who is sitting at a table and reading a yellow paper. Sage speaks thoughtfully to the interlocutor, expressing doubt or concern. Sage looks away thoughtfully, thinking to himself. Sage speaks worriedly to Minso, who calmly looks at him through the window overlooking the sky. Sage reflects on the importance of a task that requires the personal involvement of the master of the magic tower. A man reads a document carefully by the window, intently studying its contents. An elderly man in a white hooded robe, Hummel Glimwitz, regrets being late. In an office, a man in a suit sits at a table and talks to a man in a white robe standing opposite him. Sage thinks someone is studying hard in a secluded place and is sure that much can be achieved in a day or 2 of hard work. The image shows a man in a black suit agreeing with a woman in a white robe standing next to him at a table in a bright room. Sage explains that he wanted to come here because it was his dream, standing in a bright room with plants. Sage noticed something, and the man in the green apron said, "Oh," and walked up to him. Sage meets a man in work clothes carrying a bucket of tools, and they start talking. An elderly man in gardening attire speaks warmly, placing his hand on his chest. Sage reacts with bewilderment to the farmer's words, expressing inner confusion. Sage talks to an older man in a garden who smiles and adjusts his hat. Sage looks thoughtfully ahead against a backdrop of green plants and a bright sky. Sage smiles and begins to speak, addressing the interlocutor. Sage talks to an old man in the garden who says it's been 40 years since he started working. Against the backdrop of green leaves, the thought of the reason for the long wait sounded. He stands against the backdrop of the building and speaks in a friendly manner to those around him, talking about the residents. Sage coughs sheepishly as a man in a hat tries to get his attention. Sage talks to a man in a hat on a wooden walkway, expressing concern. The image shows gold coins falling and forming tall stacks, symbolizing the reward for labor. The image shows an elderly man with a mustache, wearing plaid clothing, looking down with a thoughtful expression on his face. He wonders who he is to undermine their work. Sage looks surprised and tense, as if he has suddenly heard something important or unexpected. An old man in a hat looks worriedly at a hand with blood held by another man. Sage carefully examines the hand of an elderly man in a hat, who watches him with interest. An old man in a hat says that there is no need to leave, looking at a hand with dirty fingers that someone extends to him. Sage stares ahead with concentration, his bright blue eyes reflecting determination and inner strength. Sage clenches his fist and says firmly that the way to make a lot of money quickly will not happen again. Sage sits thoughtfully at the table and then speaks forcefully about the importance of something. Sage reflects on its current workload of research, lectures, and orders, noting that delays in payment could be a problem. Sage stands at the table, reading the newspaper carefully, lost in thought. Sage, reading the newspaper, exclaims that something has surprised him and asks to wait. The woman in the hat said it was an appropriation, and the man responded that it was wrong, but the image shows a woman in white clothes and a hat with a black bow looking serious and focused. A woman in a hat screams in rage, and a man with his eyes closed sighs heavily, holding a cup in his hands. Sage looks very angry and tense, with anger symbols appearing around him. The woman in the hat screams, "No," and is indignant about sending a newbie to isolation training, addressing the man in white, while the old man calmly drinks tea. An elderly man in a white robe sits at a table with a cup in his hands and begins to speak, but his words are not visible in the image. Minso tries to object, but is interrupted when she looks at the table with a row of candles. Woman in hat surprised that research fee was only used 3 times. The image shows a woman with long dark hair who speaks thoughtfully about the need to do something. The woman in the hat explains that the income from potion production will be enough to last them 3 months. An elderly man with long white hair speaks calmly about the Vice Tower. The elderly man folded his hands thoughtfully and began to explain something important. Minso says there is no fresh air in the closed space, while others are busy reading and discussing. Sage turns angrily to Minso, who is sitting in front of him with her back to him in a luxurious setting. An elderly man in a white robe sits at a table in a library and carefully reads a letter. Sage sees the old man's reflection in the cup he holds in his hand and reacts with silent surprise. A man with long dark hair interrupts the meeting to ask who is there, and an older man invites them in. Sage introduced himself as Oscar Crucian, peeking out from behind the door with a slight smile. Sage asked the seated man what was wrong, to which he replied that he had a proposition, while the woman in the hat sat silently to the side. Sage exclaims in surprise while in the library, expressing surprise at what he heard. Sage points to the man and reminds him of the recent misappropriation of research funds. Sage stands at the table, leaning his hand on it and looking down thoughtfully. Sage stands in front of an old man who is reading a newspaper and says that if it really is Cadence flu, then the news is terrible. Amid the fire, it is said that there is currently no cure for the Cadence flu, although the White Tower previously created a vaccine and there were no problems. Sage speaks while standing in front of bookshelves, expressing calm and confidence. Sage looks in surprise at the man in the white cloak, who explains that it is related to the White Tower, while the old man and Minso watch the conversation. He sits in a chair in the library, head down, silently thinking. The image shows a vaccine in a syringe, and a voiceover says that no one has been able to reproduce this vaccine in the last 20 years. He expresses shock and tension with wide eyes, as if faced with unexpected and disturbing news. Sage addresses Minso, who is sitting in a chair wearing a hat with a large bow in a luxurious room with a stained glass window. Sage smiled and declared that he was a genius, touching the decoration on his chest. The image shows part of a face with one eye wide open and an expression of intense surprise or anger. Sage smiles calmly with her eyes closed, inserting the chopsticks into her ear, creating a sense of peace. She points her finger in anger and accuses her interlocutor of complete ignorance of how money works. An elderly man with long gray hair folded his hands thoughtfully, standing in a bright room with large windows. She apologizes with long dark hair, feeling awkward and a drop of sweat on her face. Sage stands in the room, looking down thoughtfully, lost in his thoughts. Sage stands at the table and addresses the interlocutor, expressing seriousness in the conversation. The character's thoughts say that the owner of this body and he are different entities. Sage smiles and starts a conversation in a bright, elegantly decorated room. An elderly man reads a newspaper at a table, while his other hand in the foreground gestures to engage in conversation. 7 figures in long gray robes stand with their backs to the viewer in front of a luminous pillar. The image suggests that becoming a cardinal, the second most powerful person in the order, requires a huge amount of campaign funds, and the reality is far from that. A man in a chair laughs as a servant bows and brings in a tray of gold bars. A tall, ancient clock tower is shown against a dark sky, suggesting that this was once a great city, but is now falling into decline. Sage walks away from the table as two men in white discuss something over cups of coffee. Sage notices something strange and expresses surprise by gesturing to an object in the room. Sage spins the globe with his hand, creating the sensation of rapid movement. Someone points a finger at a glowing spot on an old map, drawing attention to a certain point. Sage says he spent a month in Nox before coming to Siren, and another man adds that someone will spend a month in Moscow. Three characters look in one direction with surprise and attention, expressing the unexpectedness and tension of the situation. Sage reveals that the people of the Altera Order have angered the Earth Goddess, and that this is tantamount to a death sentence. Sage says something tensely, and Minso, leaning on the table, listens attentively to him in the library. The woman in the hat with a bow raised her hand thoughtfully, without saying a word. Sage says with determination, "Then," to Minso, who is listening to him at the table. Sage looks surprised and worried while standing in a library with shelves of books in the background. An elderly man with white hair and a beard says that he does not want to interfere in the affairs of his interlocutor, holding an envelope in his hands. The image shows a woman in a hat with long dark hair looking worried, while an older man with white hair and a green beard laughs while holding a book. Sage quotes 30,000 bells while in library. Sage is very excited. His eyes are wide open and a bead of sweat has appeared on his face. Sage, tired and depressed, stands at a table with flasks and scales, covering his face with his hand. Sage checks lab equipment and thinks everything is okay. Sage thinks he works hard and is now the one suffering the most because of Caden's illness. Sage smiles and rolls up his sleeves as he prepares to work with flasks and test tubes on a lab bench. He screams in panic, trying to explain something or stop what is happening. Sage peers through his glasses, a red light falling on his face. Sage begins the process of distilling the red liquid in the lab, deciding that the time has come for action. Sage smiled, taking his glasses off his head as if he was about to say or do something. Sage looks closely at the bottle of liquid as another man's heavy breathing can be heard in the distance. A man with blue hair screams in pain as he tries to hold heavy bags and complains that his back is breaking. Sage, tired and holding a long receipt, says he's out of the game and shows the receipt as Minso watches him. He receives a vial of liquid from another person's hand while holding a long scroll of text. He laughs happily, holding a small bottle in his hand against a backdrop of stars. He carefully places wet leaves in a basket against a backdrop of green foliage. Sage shows another man the contents of a bag of blue leaves, explaining something as he points to them. Sage calmly looks at Minso, who is holding his head in fear, and asks why this was done. He touches his head thoughtfully, as if trying to remember or understand something important. Sage smiles, and next to him Minso hovers annoyed, wearing a hat with lightning bolts over his head. Sage carries bags and looks at a man with blue hair who is also holding a bag in a room with a fireplace. Sage stands with his eyes closed and Minso stands behind him, while the young man with blue hair looks forward thoughtfully. Sage and another man carry heavy bags as they walk intently through a marble-floored room with a flaming torch. Sage, sitting on her knees, holds a bag and looks at the man with blue hair standing next to her, who is leaning on the table and listening intently. The image shows red camellias, ghost mushrooms, and myrtle leaves, accompanied by words listing the plants. Sage handed Minso the basket and asked if the ingredients needed to be cleaned before use. Sage carefully arranges flowers in a wooden basket for steaming. The image shows steamed dumplings in a cooking basket, and the dialogue discusses why this was suddenly mentioned. Sage put the lid on the steamer while the other blue-haired man watched him in surprise. Sage discusses plans to corner the potion market with another man while the man expresses doubt and worry. Sage asked if the detox process was complete, to which the other replied that it was just softening the ingredients for the next stage. Sage uses concentrated air magic, causing glowing streams of energy to form around his hands. Sage raises his hands, creating a purple glow, while the man with blue hair standing next to him looks surprised and worried. Sage concentrates energy between his hands, creating a vortex of purple and green glowing streams. Sage concentrates on manipulating the multicolored magical spheres hovering above his hands in a room with stone floors and wooden furniture. A gloved hand holds a shiny bottle with blue liquid against a background of glowing orange spots. Sage looks at the bottle of liquid in his hand with surprise. He thinks to himself that he can't use different magics at the same time, and he can't admit that he doesn't know how to do it. Sage watches the magic, and Minso thinks his mana control is a little unstable, but better than she expected. Sage strains to control or understand the purple energy emanating from before him, breathing heavily and expressing confusion. Sage asked if something bad had happened as he watched another man with blue hair prepare food. Sage announces with surprise that he has reached level 3, addressing a dark-haired man standing next to a glowing portal. He with blue hair explains that everything is simple if you know the principles, addressing another person. They show a brain divided into left and right parts, explaining that magic A is used on the left and magic B on the right. Sage watches another man raise his hands, looking worried and trying to explain something. The image shows a close-up of an eye with a bright green pupil surrounded by glowing purple and yellow energies. Sage claps his hands with a smile as he watches the surprised young man with blue hair who looks worried and tense. Sage looks away and begins to speak, expressing his thoughts or feelings. He reflects on how the technique, which was painstakingly studied, was not passed on to the younger generation for free, and it became a tradition while mixing the ingredients. Sage and Minso discuss strategy on the map, noting that tradition is a hindrance to survival on the bloody battlefield, and daily exchanges of tactics are necessary. Sage exclaimed with a smile, looking at the small bottle in his hand. Sage smiles as she holds up a glowing bottle of liquid, as if offering it to someone. Sage smiles and watches as another man with blue hair happily holds a bottle near the food table in the room. He, with blue hair, smiles and a drop of sweat on his face, sorts through the contents of a bag. The legs of another person are visible nearby. Sage smiles while indoors with a burning torch in the background. Sage counted the bottles, noting their number, and another man, breathing heavily, admitted that he felt like he was going to die. The man urgently reports that they have a problem. Sage looks worried as he accepts the document handed to him by Minso, who is out of frame. Sage stands thoughtfully as a man with black hair reads a letter and another with blue hair approaches them. Sage reads a document while Minso supports an excited young man with blue hair. Sage reads the letter carefully, studying its contents intently in a bright room. Sage asked in surprise if this was true, turning to the man holding the document. The image shows a building with the sign, "A certain lodging in Siren," against a sky with clouds. Someone is sitting in a chair and hears a knock on the door, addressing the Archbishop. Archbishop Baldwin sits quietly in an armchair with a cup of tea, preparing for a talk in the library. Moira bows, stating that he has arrived without problems, and Neil stands behind him at the open door of the room. Sage approaches the seated man in a friendly manner and extends his hand, indicating a willingness to talk. An elderly man smiles and folds his hands, radiating confidence and calmness. Sage smiles and expresses surprise or admiration in response to something sudden or unexpected. A man in green speaks to Sage, who is sitting opposite him in a setting with a chair and books. "Two men are talking," one exclaims in surprise, and the other coughs in embarrassment, trying to get attention. Sage laughs awkwardly and gestures as he sits on a sofa in a bright room. Man screaming in anger, expressing strong emotions indoors with windows in background. The man in green sternly says that their schedule does not allow it, and those sitting opposite try to object. An elderly man with gray hair speaks with an angry expression against the background of bookshelves. Three men are sitting at a table in a room. One of them is addressing the other two, who are listening attentively to his words. Three men look anxiously at the opening door, and one of them wonders who this person is. Sage, with his eyes closed, placed his hand on his chest and introduced himself as Oscar. Sage smiles with a slight mystery without saying a word. Sage and another man sit across from an older man in a room with bookshelves, and the older man asks about the White Tower. Three men are sitting at a table. One of them expresses surprise, the others listen attentively. Sage smiles and looks away as if she's about to say something or is already saying something. An elderly man speaks thoughtfully, without revealing the content of his speech. Sage points a finger and expresses anger or determination when saying something with strong emotional intensity. Sage is standing in front of a seated man and explaining something. They have a teapot and 2 cups on the table. Sage places his hand on a wooden block, making a sound to attract attention. Sage opens a wooden box to reveal a shiny glass bottle with a cork. Sage listens with surprise and concern to an older man who is calmly explaining something while sitting opposite him. Three men discuss permission from the Imperial Food and Drug Administration. One of them objects that they do not have the necessary permission. Sage appears anxious and speaks tensely, expressing strong emotions. Sage addresses the man, who responds to him while standing in a white outfit with a serious expression on his face. Sage extends his hand with a smile and begins to speak, expressing confidence and interest. Sage says something serious, looking forward with a determined expression on his face. Sage, with bright blue eyes, furiously demands that he take his words back immediately. Sage raised his hand in concentration, as if about to use magic or power. The image shows the tall azure tower with a sign about the gap that all the craftsmen wanted to close. Sage says thoughtfully that the gap will never close, even after 10,000 years. Sage clenches his fist tensely and says that someone must have forgotten something important. Sage speaks in an irritated tone, then suddenly stops talking, noticing something unexpected. Sage stands with his back to a dark purple and blue abstract background with red letters expressing a scream or tension. Sage has his back turned as two men on the couch discuss how the aura they recently felt couldn't have come from level 2. Sage said, "What?" in surprise, turning to look at something behind him against the backdrop of the bookshelves. He knocks on the door in a panic and apologizes for disturbing, turning to the Archbishop. Sage and 3 men in the library are discussing something important intensely. One of them starts to say, "This is..." The man picked up the phone in surprise after hearing unexpected news. A man listens anxiously to a conversation on the phone, a bead of sweat running down his face. Sage smiles while looking forward, expressing calm and confidence. A man asks on the phone about side effects, to which another replies that there are none, and asks about the timing of the second batch. Sage stands outside and reports that this is exactly what he said. A man talks anxiously on an old phone, touching his head and sweating from the strain. The man smiles, takes the phone from a surprised Sage, and confirms that the call went through. Sage slammed the table hard, expressing anger and determination. Sage asks if she knows anything about the laws regarding wars. Sage speaks thoughtfully, expressing doubt or concern about the topic being discussed. A character with long dark hair explains that the deadliest weapon in the war against demons was the pandemic, with a fire and fighting figures in the background. 3 employees busily stamp documents in a library surrounded by tall shelves and stacks of paper. A woman in a mask gives an injection to a man with a bandage on his head who is sitting in a tent, while another man stands nearby. Sage stands by the door while 3 men on the couch discuss how they are not currently at war. The map depicts armies, accompanied by explanations of war between species and revolution as the causes of conflicts. Sage looks anxious and tense, a bead of sweat running down his face against a bright burst of light. The image explains that Cadena flu is a Class B natural disaster, so there is no need to comply with FDA laws. The man firmly states that the treatment will be sent to the Vince estate immediately, interrupting his interlocutor. The elderly man with gray hair asked again in surprise, not understanding what was said. The image shows 2 men in a room with bookshelves. One of them looks worried and the other speaks seriously. The man angrily slammed his fist on the table, expressing his strong displeasure. Sage looks at the worried white-haired man with a serious expression, who is sweating and clearly nervous. Sage suddenly stands up in front of the seated man, who looks at him in surprise while a third man watches them from a chair. Sage asks with a disgruntled look if these guys have a book of villainous dialogues, while the other man looks away silently. Sage smiles and turns to the interlocutor, expressing mild surprise or pause. Sage looks with displeasure at the other man, who smiles and says something confidently. Sage is under a lot of stress and anger. His face is distorted with rage. Sage walks forward quickly with a tense expression on his face, while the other man walks away without turning around. A man stands in front of a seated old man in a room with bookshelves and a table with a teapot and cups on it. The image shows 2 men standing opposite each other, one in a black coat, the other in a white cloak, with no apparent dialogue between them. Sage looks at the table where a green leaf and a blue glow are floating in front of him. Sage looks down at the glowing green mark on his coat, clearly concerned about what is happening. Sage looks tense and sweaty, and behind him stands a hooded figure holding a bottle, accompanied by thoughts of its unique and refreshing scent. The image shows a man with white hair on his back, with the smell of mint lingering around him. Sage stands in the rain, looking ahead in shock, as if he has just realized something important. Sage stands by the closed door, silently watching the falling leaves and the sound of the lock clicking. Sage stands by the door, listening to the man in the chair who raises his hand and begins to speak. Sage politely addresses a seated man in a room with bookshelves and sofas. Sage raised his hand and smiled, as if inviting attention or a stop. A man laughs nervously and says something while sitting on a chair in a room. A few hours later, an important event begins at the White Tower. She studies a check for 10 million. surrounded by a bright flash effect. Sage smiles and extends his hand in greeting while in a room with a door in the background. Minseo suddenly hugs Sage from behind, and he makes a noise in response while the other man cheerfully encourages him to do it. An elderly man with white hair and a green scarf accepts blue papers from another person's hands with surprise. Minseo hugs Sage and he smiles while the man at the table asks in surprise about some fees. Sage looks forward with a slight smile, as if preparing for an important event or conversation. Sage confirmed the agreement. Standing between Minseo and the other man as a document with a large sum of money was held in front of them. Sage delivers an important announcement to an elderly man who reacts with surprise. A man happily tells something to the person sitting opposite him, who listens attentively. Sage smiles and explains that he received a contract with a payout that exceeded their expectations, comparing it to the Archbishop's distribution. An elderly man with white hair holds a letter and says in surprise that this is incredible. He smiles and gives a thumbs-up sign of approval while in the library. The old man said that if support was needed, it was necessary to inform, and that 1 week would be tight, while Sage and Minseo stood across from him at the table. A character in a hat with a bow smiles and asks if she should say anything. 2 men are discussing rumors that pork will be served instead of chicken for dinner, and one of them reacts with interest to the news. Sage and Minseo enter the room where others in white robes are talking, and one of them asks what is going on. Sage speaks to elders and claps his hands to show determination or to attract attention. Minseo smiles as he talks to the green-haired man, while Sage, sitting behind him, watches them in silence. Sage snaps his fingers to attract attention in the room. Sage and Minseo cover their ears and look alarmed by the loud noise around them. Sage says something important with his hand on his chest in a room with bookshelves and a fireplace. The image shows 2 men in white clothes talking by a fire, one with golden hair asking a question to the other with dark hair. Sage asked why, and Minseo responded with an indifferent duh. Minseo raised her hand and began to talk about the production of the White Tower. Minseo listens as one of the men tells the other that he should think about all the money he spent. Sage reported that the order had been carried out, turning to Minseo, who was standing in front of him with another man in white robes. A group of white-robed people with serious faces look around the lab, feeling tension and anxiety. Sage reads the letter carefully, holding it in his hand, and appears thoughtful. Minseo asked with displeasure if this was the way someone who asked their elders for a favor should behave. Minseo looks at the man with tension as he and the other man look worried in the arched hall. Minseo stopped abruptly, and Sage, holding a piece of paper, looked at her with a serious expression. Sage reads the letter and Minseo turns towards him with concern. Minseo says with slight anxiety that thanks to the talent and prudence of his interlocutor, 7 corporations. Sage is surprised, and Minseo reveals that Descartes Rain is a 5th-level mage, 26 years old, who's been offered the position of instructor at the Imperial Academy 4 times. He covered his mouth with his hand in surprise and quietly exclaimed, "Oh my God." Sage addresses a group of people holding a piece of paper with text in his hands, while the others listen attentively to his words. Minseo looks worried and tense, looking away with a bead of sweat on her cheek. Several people in white uniforms with black elements look tense and worried in a room with patterns on the walls. Sage talks white, highlighting her outfit with silver jewelry. Minseo notices that everyone has chosen to stay out in the cold, and he says that if he doesn't trust such people, then... Sage smiles and begins to speak, asking whose voice is coming from off-camera. Sage addresses the blue-haired man, who replies that he is talking about him, and then asks Frank to hurry up with his preparations. Sage puts on his glasses looking confused, and Minseo watches him silently with slight concern. Minseo coughs to get attention, and Sage looks at the basket of gloves and packages on the table. Minseo holds a cup and looks thoughtful, while Sage and the others discuss why they should do things themselves and ask where to start. Sage smiles and says something confidently, while the one standing next to him looks slightly nervous and adjusts his glasses. Sage said with surprise that it was chicken and expressed doubt that it could be rat meat. Sage and others celebrate joyfully, raising their hands and screaming in delight amidst an atmosphere of fun and confetti. A week later, Sage notices petals arranged in a heart shape on the grass and is surprised by their appearance. Sage sits on a chair on a green lawn, holding a scroll and a piece of paper in her hands, smiling. Sage sits on a chair in the garden and reads the newspaper attentively. Against the backdrop of a tall, tower-like building, enlarged images of viruses are visible, creating an atmosphere of menace and tension. 2 men shake hands in front of a building, expressing mutual respect and agreement. Sage thinks everything is going according to plan until Oscar runs up to him and calls out. The young man happily reports that orders for the vaccine are coming in large quantities. Sage happily jumps up and down next to Minso, who is quietly reading a book while sitting at a table on the grass. He, with blue hair, said something in surprise against the backdrop of greenery and windows. Sage smiles as he sits on a chair in the garden, while others clench their fists and marvel at how many things he has restored. Sage makes a two-finger gesture with her eyes closed, and he watches her with admiring eyes. The image shows a bottle with a gemstone on the cap and the words "Star Tears" written in the center. Against the backdrop of a starry sky, it is said that this is a miraculous potion that can bring the dead back to life. Sage touches his chin thoughtfully as he stands on the green grass, thinking about something important. Sage sits on a chair and smiles, pointing his finger, while Minseo stands in front of him with his head down, expressing displeasure. Sage says with surprise that both products are Siren's specialty, expressing bewilderment at what was said. Sage exclaimed that Minso was completely crazy and was surprised that he came here because he didn't believe her. Sage, breathing heavily and leaning on his staff, falls behind while the other hooded man calmly adjusts his collar. Sage stands by the carriage as the driver warns that the carriage will not be able to pass through the deep road, and another man kneels down next to the carriage. Sage says they've walked 10 miles and are almost there, and Minso is surprised to hear the word miles. Sage is surprised to think they have got rid of pounds, admitting they were harder to count. Sage reflects on how the calculations made the process fun as Minso listens against the backdrop of the sunset. Sage walks down a path to a house where another man is knocking on the door, surrounded by flowering fields and trees at sunset. A man with a red eye and a gray beard looks in the door, saying that the interlocutor has come all the way. Sage notices the approaching cars and says they will only take them as far as the entrance, while another man stands nearby. 2 cars speed down a country road past a house where 2 men in raincoats stand watching the scene. The image shows a car wheel running over rocks and grass, creating a sense of movement and tension. A man in a white suit and hat called out loudly to the owner with a grin, looking at his watch. Sage asked sharply if she wanted to sell her land today. Sage charges forward resolutely despite his opponent's attempts to stop him. A man in a white suit with a mustache and glasses mockingly addressed someone, calling him an old man. The image shows an elderly man with a gray beard looking down with a serious expression on his face. The man in white says he's offering 10 times that amount, and the other asks Oscar what's going on, to which he replies he doesn't know. Businessman Dwar Powell extends his hand in greeting, smiling against the sunset. An elderly man with a gray beard, Ivan, looks thoughtfully at the sunset, standing against the backdrop of trees and a wooden building. A man in a white suit offers to sell something now and spend the rest of his days in comfort, standing against the backdrop of retro cars and several men in suits. Against the backdrop of a sunset, a man in a white suit and hat stands confidently. The silhouette of another person is visible nearby, and another character is partially shown on the right. A man in a white suit with a hat and glasses tells everyone to go, addressing a group of people against the backdrop of a sunset. 2 men are talking near a car. One is wearing a white suit with a hat and glasses. The other is holding a suitcase near the open door of the car. Sage made a sharp motion with his hand, expressing determination or irritation. A bundle of money falls to the ground with force, creating an explosive effect. Several people say goodbye to those leaving in cars. One of them sighs, and another waves and says bye. In a car, 2 men in tuxedos are driving, and a third in a white suit with a hat is asking what the beggars are doing on the street. Minso threw her glasses away abruptly, and Sage holds the newspaper in her hand. A man in a white suit with a hat reads a newspaper carefully, concentrating on studying the news. He hit the other man sharply on the head with a rolled-up newspaper, causing him pain and fear. He muses that the old man might bring the White Tower's reinforcements, and then he will again refuse to sell for many years. A man in a white suit coughs nervously and says he can barely keep up with the interest payments on his loan. Sage addresses someone as "Hey" while in a car, where his tense reaction is visible. 3 men in a car are engaged in a tense conversation. One of them in a white suit and hat addresses 2 others in black suits. Sage was hit sharply on the head with a newspaper, ordering him to kill him and cover up the traces. There are 2 men in tuxedos in the car, one of whom says it will stink a bit, but they have support. The image shows a man in a white suit with a newspaper in his hand, smiling and saying that it is still history. 3 people walk towards a wooden house. One asks the other if he is sure that everything is okay, and the third replies that he knows what to do. Sage asked Minso who the guy was earlier, remembering that they were walking and he showed up in a car. Sage asks in surprise why the other man would go so far as he stands there clenching his fist. Two young men in white capes listen attentively to an old man who addresses them with a serious look. The image shows an elderly man with a gray beard, clenching his fist and looking determined. Sage explains that this is how he manages to hold on while the other listens in amazement. Sage reacts in surprise to something while looking into the distance against a backdrop of sunset and trees. An elderly man with his eyes closed says he loves this land. Sage and Minso are lying on the grass at night. He smiles and talks about how someone quickly walked inside shyly. Sage and another man are lying on the grass, and the second man says that the stars here shine so brightly that it makes him jealous. Sage lies on the grass and smiles, enjoying the moment. Sage says something under the starry sky, expressing gratitude. Sage says he knows something important, addressing a surprised blue-haired interlocutor. Sage sits on the grass looking thoughtfully ahead, and he with blue hair lies next to her and laughs, trying to hide his awkwardness. Sage looks at the starry sky and thinks about something important. Minso says that the streetlights are now so bright at night that the stars are no longer visible, adding that the inconveniences of that time now seem almost romantic. He lies on the grass and smiles, looking up. Sage under the night sky expressed confidence that it is not impossible. Sage reacts to a sudden sound or event with wide eyes, expressing shock and tension. Sage asks him why he's so tense, if he saw a ghost, to which he replies that he saw people, not ghosts. A man with blue hair sits on the grass and looks wary, sweating and turning around after hearing a sound nearby. Minso thinks that even with his good mana detection, he can't sense them and warns that they don't come with good intentions. Sage, standing in the meadow at night, ordered someone to get up. He asks excitedly if the event happened too suddenly. A man with dark hair chews gum and runs next to an old man who moves forward with concentration. Three men suddenly notice each other near a house. Two of them are surprised, and the third comes up from behind. The red-haired man from Jax's gang reports hearing about a possible mage and expresses relief when he learns that the information is from the White Tower. Two men are walking down a path. One says it would be worse if it was one of the four great towers. The other hopes to meet a mage and fight him. A man asks if he should come in, showing his claws, while another man with red hair looks at him. A gloved hand inserts a key into a door lock, trying to open it. Sage approaches the bed cautiously with a knife in his hand, thinking to himself that the situation is too... Sage turns around sharply, noticing something behind the door, and looks alarmed. Sage concentrates energy into his fist, creating a glowing ball of power. The image shows the glowing text "Wind Bullet" against a mystical pattern. Sage takes a powerful blow to the head, causing blood to spurt out, with glowing energy rings in the background. Sage, covered with a cloak, looks at a body with green hair lying in a pool of blood on the floor of a wooden room. The image shows pages of magical texts and a description of a spell that reinterprets the principle of firearms using wind magic. Sage walks out of the building and wonders what he should do next. Someone asks if there are only two left. The image shows two men standing next to each other in the dark, an old man with white hair and a long beard in front, and a young man with red hair behind him. Sage assumed he would sleep for a while. Two men talking at night, one with long blonde hair, the other with red hair. He listens attentively to his interlocutor. A man in a red coat delivers a powerful blow, tearing apart the space in front of him. The old man delivers a powerful blow with his spear, and Sage deftly stops it with one finger, causing surprise. The image shows three swords rapidly slamming into the surface, creating an explosion of energy and sparks. Sage suddenly attacks the white-haired man, striking with his staff and causing a bright glow to appear around him. The image shows a man with a long white beard and bright blue eyes, looking at him with a smirk and a tense expression. Sage smiles in approval, saying that it's not bad at all. Sage prepares to attack with a focused expression, surrounded by sparkling energy, in a tense moment before the story continues. The image shows an elderly man with a long white beard, smiling and looking down with a cunning expression. Sage said with admiration that what he saw was impressive. Sage dodges a blow aimed at him and reacts with surprise. An old man with white hair and a mustache prepares to attack and says with disdain that the situation is very unfortunate. Sage firmly declared that it was over and focused his energy forward with his finger. Sage fires two glowing energy balls from his finger and says, "This is much more boring." Sage clenches his hand from which a bright glow emanates, demonstrating power or magic. The man deflects the attack with two swords in surprise, making sounds of effort. Sage is surprised that despite the surprise, the enemy remains calm and does not get lost in the fight. The image shows the moment of destruction with the effect of an explosion, accompanied by thoughts that he shoots very gracefully and refinedly. Sage smiles and creates a glowing magical ball that floats above his palm under the night sky. Sage reacts with surprise to the sudden event, expressing shock and bewilderment. Sage suddenly jumps towards the man in front with white hair, who thinks that there is no retreat after victory. Close-up of the muzzle of a pistol pointed directly at the viewer with a flash effect and the sound of a shot. Sage looks forward sharply. A powerful stream of light bursts from his eyes, accompanied by the sound BYO. Sage dodges a powerful lightning strike that shatters the ground around him. A red-haired man shoots another man who falls with a wound in his back under the night sky. Against the backdrop of the night sky, a man with red hair confidently holds a gun and gestures for action. The image shows a man with a long white beard in profile against a dark green background. Sage, blood on his face, looks ahead with a cold expression, intensely focused on what is happening. He loads a gun against a backdrop of green grass and lilac flowers. The red-haired man suddenly noticed something as he looked closely at the device in his hands. Sage thoughtfully touched his face as if checking something and began to speak, but his words are not visible in the image. A man with red hair confidently holds a gun against the night sky, expressing self-confidence. Sage refused, lying on the ground with a wound on his head, and another man asked why he did not agree. Against the backdrop of the night sky, a man with red hair smiles, holding an ornate weapon to his cheek. Night. A loud sound is heard against the backdrop of mountains and trees, but the characters are not visible. Sage lies on the grass by the fence and ponders the state of the former master of the magic tower. Sage peers through the narrow opening in the fence, contemplating the only possible passage. The narrator explains that after firing 2 bullets, the attacks stop for 1.4 seconds while he reloads the weapon and then attacks again. A man in red asks where a rat is gone while standing in a green field with rows of flowering plants. Sage thinks the enemy has 1 bullet left, and if he can finish it all in 1.24 seconds, then... Sage orders the team to speed up, activating a magic circle that says accelerate. Against a backdrop of green grass and a wooden fence, bright flashes of energy and sound effects are seen conveying a powerful impact or collision. Sage rushes forward, surrounded by sparkling energy and lightning. A man with red hair holding a gun looks around and asks if there's anyone there. Sage is surrounded by a glowing protective dome as he moves forward rapidly in the night space. A character with red hair shoots a gun and laughs, saying that the interlocutor is fast. Sage is in the center of an energy circle with a red target, surrounded by lightning and light. A man with red hair fires a gun, causing a powerful, fiery explosion. Sage watches as a bright swirl of energy suddenly appears before him. Sage focuses on the glowing ball surrounded by an energy field and a red blade, as if controlling a powerful force. Sage concentrates on using magic while surrounded by a glowing green energy field. The red-haired man tensely says that it is impossible to dodge with just a speed spell and ponders the enemy's capabilities. The image shows a tense man with red hair exclaiming in surprise, asking about the shield. Sage directs energy into the forehead of the man with the weapon, paralyzing him with an unexpected magical effect. Sage touches a glowing blue ball radiating energy in a tense atmosphere. Sage moved his hand sharply, releasing a blast of energy, accompanied by a splash of blood against a dark background. Sage stands over a wounded man with a gun, preparing to say something against a backdrop of flowering grass. Sage holds the weapon and says the word Trinity. Sage examines an antique pistol with fine detailing in his hands while standing against a night landscape. Sage explains that it has applied friction reduction and improved internal strength to the windscreen. Sage explains that the outer part was flexible and the inner part was strong, so the bullet did not penetrate the barrier and slid off it. Sage walks through a flowering field and ponders the need to learn magic for protection when returning to the White Tower. Sage runs quickly with a weapon in his hands, watching what is happening around him intently. The image shows 3 men with guns and one with a covered face standing against a red, ominous background, creating a tense atmosphere. The image shows the text, "Just don't get caught," against a background of dynamic black lines, creating a tense atmosphere. Sage mentally urges him to hold on longer as 2 men stand in the woods across from him. A man with gray hair asks a boy with blue hair what he is going to do, and he replies, "Let's go." Sage, with a slight smile and a bead of sweat on his face, looks at the man in the forest, who stands with his hand on his belt, and watches him. A man places his hand on the shoulder of a young man with blue hair who looks tense and worried. Sage sarcastically remarks that white lies are touching and asks why she doesn't chase the fleeing man. Sage holds a sword with a smile and laughs as he starts a conversation against a forest backdrop. He looks ahead with concentration, hiding his thoughts behind a serious expression. Sage swings his sword vigorously in the forest, beginning to speak. Sage, with a furious expression, delivers a powerful sword strike, surrounded by motion and light effects. Sage reacts with surprise to a scissor stab to the chest and hears a call to do something more fun. Sage, with a bright, evil look, suddenly attacks another person, squeezing him in a grip. Sage notices that the feeling of the sword hitting the heart is too light and wonders about the meaning of the word swoop. Sage noticed with alarm that something was wrong and thought the situation was strange. Sage grabbed Minso's hand sharply, stopping her movement. He strikes the opponent in the chest with a glowing blade, causing him to cry out in pain. Sage clutches his chest, blood comes out of his mouth, and a sword is visible between his legs while someone stands in front of him. Sage explains that he has a unique physique as glowing energy emanates from his chest. Sage walked up to the fallen man and said, "Ack," in pain. Sage is alarmed to notice that he almost stepped on something while someone hides behind a tree with a gun in hand. Sage hides behind a tree and ponders that Fran is a special type of mage and also has something else. Sage notices that Fran has a wind spirit and is surprised by the magic that turns part of his body into wind. Sage reflects on the rarity of the event, noting that even he, as a Tower Master, had only seen references to it in ancient texts. Sage says that the 7th Tower Master's magic is unique and did not think that Fran inherited the wind spirit, then suddenly calls out to him, which frightens Fran. Sage is alarmed to see a wounded man on the ground, while another man says he was just worried about him. Sage reacts with surprise when he is addressed as Mr. Ivan. Sage screams, "Come back!" and he's in chains thinking about this kid. Sage noted the potential of someone to become a powerful mage, then sensed something and suggested Minso to check out the place. Against the backdrop of the sunset sky and a flowering field, a wooden house is visible, and below, someone is saying, "Thank you." Sage laughs and says he didn't do anything. It was all on the other guy's conscience, while another man hugs him. Sage reacts to something in surprise, saying, "Huh?" A man with dark hair smiles with his hands on the shoulders of another man with blue hair, who is embarrassed, while Sage stands next to him smiling. In the image, Sage is standing at a table, watching a man with gray hair and another man with blue hair juggling balls. Sage and Minso talk intently to a man who sits down on a chair at the table. In the backdrop of the industrial complex, it is said that in the western region where the Magitech is produced, wastewater and pollutants flow through the Wolf River on a daily basis, which has caused the problem. Sage warns that if anyone starts building a factory closer to this land, there will come a day when it will be impossible to resist. Sage sits silently at the table, looking thoughtfully to the side. An elderly man with a gray beard said, in surprise when he heard something unexpected. The man with the gray beard was surprised to see Sage standing in front of him. The image shows a background with vertical lines and text that says that people have long respected herbalists. Sage hides in the bushes, explaining that herbalists were often accused of witchcraft, while a group of people with torches scream and search for them. A group of people are hiding in the forest, and the text says that they lived as wanderers, hiding from prying eyes. Sage and Minso were surprised when a hooded man appeared in front of them and said that kind people had taken them in. A character with long, light gold hair, hiding his face under a hood, speaks of Leonard Ayres, the 4th Master of the White Tower, and invites you to come to Shireen as your eternal home. Sage looks ahead thoughtfully, as if pondering important words or events. Sage explains that he never knew the exact words before, and Minso adds that he read them in a fairy tale book. The image shows a smiling elderly man with a gray beard looking calm and contented. Sage leaned forward sharply, his hand on the table, expressing his sudden surprise. The image shows an elderly man with gray hair looking up with an expression of calm and hope. 3 men are talking at the table. One of them demands that his tears be returned to him. From the window, you can see a man quickly packing things following the order. "Pack it quickly!" The man interrupted the phrase, "If you run, you're dead," with a sharp sound, and another in a white suit with a cigarette in his teeth sat down on the floor in fear. Sage stands in the center, calmly holding a scroll, while soldiers around him have their weapons aimed and ready to fight. Sage stands over a man in a white suit who asks fearfully why the public safety chief is here. Sage shows the document and shows it to another person, causing him to be surprised. The man orders the one in white to be detained, and another subordinate agrees to carry out the order. He internally admits that the situation is too difficult for him to handle alone. He is thinking hard that if he can contact someone, there will be a way out of this situation. The image shows a man with a cigar in his hand smiling, with a drop of sweat running down his face, expressing tension or nervousness. Sage looks forward thoughtfully, lost in his thoughts. Sage turned and listened attentively without saying a word. Sage stands in the room in formal clothes and looks down thoughtfully, preparing to say something. The man with the mustache is suddenly agitated and is having difficulty making a sound, clutching an object in his hand. A man nervously clasps his hands as he is offered a cigar while wearing white gloves. Sage approaches her boss with a question as two tied men try to justify themselves. Sage explained that it was an order from above, and the other man with a cigar listened attentively. Sage said that His Majesty loved the White Tower very much, to which the other man asked what he meant. Sage ponders why anyone would love them so much, noting that their heroic exploits were 20 years ago. A comparison comes to mind. Even if you throw a bird with broken wings high, only the speed of its fall will change. Sage asked the man how old he was, to which he replied that he was 23. Sage stands surrounded by people who applaud and rejoice, remembering how humanity defeated the demons and found true freedom. A crowd of people, including Sage, look up at the tall clock tower, raising their hands in admiration and joy. Sage stubs out a cigar in an ashtray, making a crackling sound. Sage turns sharply to the other man in uniform, who was visibly agitated. A man announces that he is heading west and is about to issue a ceasefire order, while other soldiers stand by. The image shows the thought of a character who intends to take revenge for the capture of Jack and his crew. Two men in black walk quickly down the corridor. One of them suddenly grabs the other by the hand. Sage praised someone for doing a good job, and Minseo asked what was going on. Sage asked Minso out for a drink as they walked along a path near a large building at sunset. Sage awkwardly tries to say something in front of a large building, with a hooded man standing in the distance. Sage asked in surprise, and the other man quickly walked away, shouting, "Bye, bye." The old man asked if he was mistaken when he saw Fran, addressing a man with dark hair against the backdrop of the building. The image shows an elderly man with long white hair and a beard smiling in front of a building. Sage turns around, and the old man says they're heading that way anyway. Sage stands behind an older man in a white robe with a green scarf, both in a wooden room with barred windows. Sage stands behind the old man, who looks thoughtfully ahead, while the young man ponders something important. Sage looks at the old man in surprise, who anxiously confirms that he did it. Sage reports that the Sirius family has contacted them. Sage stands in a white outfit with jewelry, clenching her fists in front of a metal gate. The image shows an elderly man with white hair and a beard, wearing light-colored clothes and a green scarf, looking thoughtfully ahead. Sage said thoughtfully that he couldn't understand why the situation had turned out this way. He sits on the floor with his clothes neatly folded and asks if Grants has arrived, inviting him in. Sage asks in surprise about the largest trading company in the Empire, and someone with blue hair remarks that he heard everything. Minseo reaches for the door handle, causing surprise among those present. Sage sits on the floor, sorting through papers from his suitcase while Minseo stands nearby, watching him. Sage sits on the floor and takes a book out of a wooden chest, immersed in studying. Sage froze, his lips slightly parted, expressing surprise or confusion. Sage, turning his back, said that he did not know what he could do in this situation. Sage is silent, looking thoughtfully ahead, not saying a word. Young man with blue hair looking worried and sweating while sitting in room with shelves in background. A man with blue hair and yellow eyes is slightly nervous and smiling in a room with bookshelves. Sage speaks seriously as he stands by the bookshelves, and another man sits on the floor, covering his face with his hand. Sage said the name Frank as he stood next to a man in a dark coat at an open door. The blue-haired man turned around abruptly, hearing something behind him. A man with silver hair checks the time on his watch, quietly tapping his fingers. Sage enters the room and Minso looks at him from the doorway, observing his actions. Sage is adamant that Frank should stay behind, watching the man with white hair. Sage stands in the doorway and he, introducing himself as Oscar, addresses him. The image shows Grank Sirius, the eldest son of the Sirius family and the deputy leader of the trading company, standing in front of glowing flowers. Sage stands in a white outfit as another man calls out to Oscar with excitement. Sage looks at his interlocutor with a slight smile, and he answers seriously, without looking away. He points at himself in surprise, and in front of him is a close-up of a hand making the V sign. The image shows a man with silver hair looking away with a serious expression on his face. Sage begins to speak when he is interrupted by a frightened young man with blue hair who demands that they not discuss it without him. He with blue hair listens in surprise to the man who is saying something next to him. Sage says something serious, and he with blue hair listens tensely, sweating from excitement. Sage looks in surprise at the startled blue-haired man who suddenly turned around after noticing something behind him. Sage placed his hand on the shoulder of the other blue-haired man who looked at him with concern. The image shows a man with silver hair standing with his arms crossed and a serious expression on his face. Sage looks ahead with indifference and begins to speak. A man with silver hair politely waves his hand while talking to a man in a white cloak. A man with silver hair enters the room, expressing seriousness and concentration. Sage suddenly approached another man with blue hair, who responded with a startled cry and sweating from excitement. Sage explains that Grank says this for a reason, showing his palm and expressing seriousness. Sage turns sharply to the startled blue-haired man, who responds with shock and alarm. Sage smiled and grabbed the shoulder of the other man, who looked worried and tried to pull away. He looked surprised and worried, with a bead of sweat on his face and his mouth slightly open. Sage smiles and says something to the interlocutor, looking into his eyes. Sage assures the interlocutor that this is possible and asks to trust him completely. Sage stands with his eyes closed, surrounded by a glowing energy field, as if preparing for an important event. Sage looks at the hand extended in front of him, expressing slight surprise. Sage points to Minseo's shoulder, who looks down in embarrassment as he feels the pricks of his fingers. He said something anxiously, standing at the closed lattice door against the backdrop of a stone wall. Sage speaks seriously to another man in a white uniform on the street, keeping his hand on his hip. Sage is surprised when someone suddenly raises a finger in front of him, getting his attention. Sage explains that a lot of mana is being lost and needs to be channeled faster, and Minso and him look confused and try to understand his words. Sage looks thoughtfully at his hand and begins to speak, expressing doubt or surprise. The image shows Sage in a white uniform with a serious expression on his face against a metal wall. Sage said he thought he was trusted, addressing another man with blue hair in a stained glass room. Sage says he's not afraid. Sage stands with his back to a dark wall, lost in dark thoughts. He sits on the floor, carefully studying the open pages of a large book in front of him. Sage places his hand on the ancient book, causing it to glow magically, and remains silent, studying the text intently. Sage wonders to himself if this wasn't part of his body. He wonders how the wind can be incredibly strong as he reads the book and conjures magic in his hand. Sage reaches out through the glowing stream of energy, as if trying to grab or stop something. Sage, with a look of alarm and a drop of sweat on his face, realizes the seriousness of the situation. The man panics and says he can't stop what's happening as glowing ribbons of energy swirl around him. A vortex of energy surrounds the stage, and a voice announces that the attempt was a complete failure. Someone screams for help, asking if anyone is nearby, against the backdrop of a swirl of water and a surprised reaction. The scene features a loud cry of "Frank," conveying the tense atmosphere. Sage admitted that he couldn't do anything on his own back then. The image shows a hand carefully lifting or peeling a thin layer of paper from a surface. Sage looks closely at the shaking white hand holding the chain, seeming focused on what is happening. He said thoughtfully with blue hair that it looked pathetic. Sage turned and looked around the room carefully, as if waiting for a response or reaction. Sage explains that a certain area needs to be expanded, and the other party counters that it's easy to say. Sage asks if he is going to make a contract with a demon, to which Minso replies that demons will never come to him. Sage stands on the magic circle and prepares for a spell, moving his hands in concentration. A man with blue hair and a white uniform shouts while raising his hand, expressing strong emotions and tension. Sage stands on the magic circle and asks why it doesn't work, while Minso watches from behind in a white cloak. Sage stands in front of a magic circle where another man with blue hair raises his hand in preparation for a spell. Sage blushes and clenches his fist, expressing strong emotions and tension. Sage listens intently as he explains the situation with surprise and confusion. Minseo says he's not going to sign a contract, to which the dark-haired man replies that it's okay, with Sage standing nearby. Sage ordered the other to step aside, saying he would try it himself. Sage stands in the center of a magic circle surrounded by glowing runes, preparing for a ritual or spell. The image shows a huge world tree against a backdrop of bright light and foliage, with no characters visible. Minso and Sage stand together on a path in the forest, surrounded by other people, as light filters through the trees. The words, "Spirit of Wind," appear against the backdrop of a glowing magic circle with feathers. Sage extends his hand and commands him to come closer. The man asks in surprise how he was able to succeed the first time while fighting strong winds. Someone asked in surprise if it was a man addressing him. An old man appears before them and asks if he is the one who summoned him. Sage stands with his back turned and looks at the glowing being surrounded by green and white streams of energy. Sage says it happened to him 27 years ago while looking at a glowing creature nearby. Sage said something so formal wasn't necessary, addressing a seated man with a green beard. Sage is asked if he is willing to establish a friendly connection with the higher spirit Celestine. Sage and Minso stand in front of a giant glowing figure, and he expresses confusion as indicated by the question mark above his head. Sage smiles and points to himself, while the blue-haired man standing behind him looks dumbfounded. Two men in white robes talk to a man in armor and another in a suit on a marble floor, discussing the reason for their presence. Sage smiles at someone in a white outfit and makes a quiet noise of displeasure. The red-haired knight shakes hands, declaring his level, while the white-haired man watches them from behind. Sage explains that the winner is the one who removes the necklace from his opponent first. Sage says if there is no winner in 5 minutes, they will accept it as a loss. 3 men meet, one in white passes a staff to another, and the third in armor looks down at them. Sage smiles and shows off the fluttering sleeves of her outfit. Sage stands with 3 cloaked figures, pointing his hand forward as a close-up of another man's leg is shown approaching them. Sage stands with his fists clenched, looking ahead intently against a backdrop of rain and sky. The man with white hair looks worried and sweating, while the red-haired man in armor standing behind him looks serious and attentive. Sage smiles and says something, and he listens to him with a serious expression and a slight excitement. Sage shakes hands with another man, marveling at level 4, while a third man watches them. Sage explains that in order to make Frank a top mage in 2 years, he needs to show exactly this level of ability. The man in armor looks forward with determination, while Sage, standing behind him, watches him closely. Sage grabbed someone's arm sharply, causing them to cry out in pain. Sage sweats slightly and smiles, looking away as if trying to hide his nervousness. Sage stands tensely, and Minso watches him from afar, not saying a word. A man with red hair greets a young man with blue hair, who responds by calling him Sir Lasley. Sage slaps his hand hard, creating a powerful sound and a tense atmosphere. A man in armor with a red cloak stands on a marble floor, watching the rapid blows accompanied by the sounds of collisions. Sage steps forward with determination, sensing the beginning of an important event. The character's internal monologue plans to ensure a distance of 20 meters and considers this ideal. He is shocked and tense when suddenly something surprises him and causes him anxiety. The image shows a man in armor with a serious expression raising a glowing sword against a dark red background. Sage is surprised by the amount of pressure without using sword chi at such a distance and thinks it is a 5th grade level. Sage points his sword menacingly at the man standing in front of him, surrounded by dark thorns in a gloomy atmosphere. He is worried and thinks that if he says now that he can't, then... Sage looks closely at the interlocutor, expressing seriousness and concentration in the conversation. Sage squeezes his hand tensely, revealing his inner turmoil. Sage looks at something in surprise, and he next to him is visibly worried and sweating. Sage looks ahead thoughtfully, not saying a word. Sage focuses on releasing glowing energy from his hand, creating a magical effect. Sage uses the magic move Wind Blade, creating a glowing blade of wind in a combat stance. He is determined and thinks that for the first time in his life, someone needs him, saying to himself, "Let's do this." He mentally asserts that he cannot fail the expectations placed on him. The red-haired man deflects several glowing attacks, showing confidence and skill in combat. The red-haired man focused on fending off attacks, demonstrating his improved skills. The focus is on a glowing energy vortex with the question of what it is like to be in such a state. A man in armor deflects a powerful sword strike, creating a bright flash of light. Energy sparkles around the impact site, accompanied by words that it is enough to observe. A red-haired knight in armor falls down with his cloak fluttering. Sage falls back with a surprised expression as he notices something sudden in front of him. He is surprised to think that the enemy is too fast to block the attack. A magical glowing pattern appears against a cloudy sky, accompanied by the words Wind Blade, indicating that a spell or ability has been activated. Sage slashes with his sword, and Minso raises his hand to block the blow. Three people are sitting on a bench. One of them is surprised by the rapid growth and asks if the other used a forbidden method for this. The man raised his hand to his face thoughtfully and made a sound of displeasure. Sage watches another man plummet downwards and notes that he has grown a lot. The red-haired knight quickly strikes with his sword, accompanied by the sounds of battle and the words that this is all. Sage stands in a fighting stance, surrounded by a vortex of energy against the backdrop of a palace hall. Thoughts convey that because of the hero's weakness, his growth can cause pain, and wounds can become relief. Sage shields himself from the rapidly flying metal hand, trying to protect himself. A glowing object suddenly appears in a hand in a metal glove, attracting attention. Sage starts to say that something is over, and the other man listens to him while looking away. He opens his eyes abruptly in surprise, expressing great amazement. Sage smiles thoughtfully, wondering why he's smiling. Minso reported that the spirit transplant was successful, but it's a pity that it's a low-level spirit. Sage stands at the board, watching a man fall to the ground and try to get up. The image shows a piece of sage clothing with chain and stone embellishment against a wall and floor. Sage explains that this is possible if you use the power of the wind god at 100%. Sage looks thoughtfully ahead in an ancient hall with arched windows under the night sky. Sage explains that it is important to hide your cards until the very end of the battle. Sage raises his arm sharply, radiating energy, preparing for a powerful blow. A man with red hair and armor looks in surprise at the glowing energy coming from his hand, while another man stands with his back to the arena. Sage prepares to attack with concentration as an armored foe is seen in the distance with his sword raised. A sharp impact sound is heard, accompanied by an exclamation of "No way!" expressing surprise or shock. Sage looks at the two glowing pendants he holds in his hands with surprise and excitement. The image shows a hand in a white glove holding a red crystal on a chain against a bright light. The young man joyfully exclaimed that he had succeeded, raising his hands up in a victory gesture. Sage says with dismay that even the healer mage said he couldn't use it again. Sage watches with restraint as a man in a white hoodie speaks to another young man who smiles and explains something. Sage praised someone by saying that they did a good job. Sage watches as two men shake hands in a brightly lit room, expressing agreement or sealing a deal. Sage and Minso stand next to each other, their attention focused on something in front of them, not speaking at the moment. A man in a cloak apologizes to a group in white robes. A knight in armor with a red cloak stands nearby. Sage looks at the interlocutor and remains silent, expressing dissatisfaction or doubt. Sage stands with his hands in his pockets, watching the armored knight lower his head in what appears to be a show of respect or apology. Sage and another man stand next to each other, looking away, in front of a light-colored building with gold accents. Sage smiles and mentally calls someone a funny person. Sage smiles and clenches his fist, expressing joy and excitement. He asked in surprise if this was the entrance. Sage points to the door and says that it is clearly an underground prison and not the entrance to a training room. He is shocked and indignantly explains the situation, trying to understand what is happening around him. Sage screams that he only had one day off, expressing despair. Sage supports and comforts Minseo, who is complaining, but Minseo asks him not to act like a child. Sage peeks out from behind the door and begins to speak, expressing surprise or concern. Sage stands in a stone-walled hallway, sweating slightly, gesturing with his hand as if he were about to show or explain something. Sage admitted that he was the one who made the request. On a black background with vertical lines appears the inscription, "The Night After the Duel." Sage discusses with another man the decision to send Frank to 30 days of isolated training, despite his recent duel victory. Elderly man with white hair and beard, smiling while sitting in decorated chair in bright room. Sage stands in the library and looks thoughtfully ahead, preparing to say something or thinking about something important. Sage looks away thoughtfully as she sits on an elegant chair in a room with stained glass windows. Sage said that it was definitely good news, sitting opposite Minso listening to him. An elderly man with long gray hair and a beard speaks in a library surrounded by shelves of books. Sage looks thoughtfully at a cup of tea while sitting at a table in the library. Sage calmly drinks tea in the library, looking thoughtfully into the distance. A man serves a cup of drink to a man in a white robe sitting in a chair by the window at night. The image shows an elderly man with white hair and a beard who starts a conversation by asking a question. The image shows a decorative arched portal with the inscription "Mage Night" against the backdrop of the starry night sky. Sage sits across the table from the hooded man, discussing the creation, demonstrating their growth in ability and harmony. The image shows a complex pattern in the form of a crescent moon and rays against the background of a starry night sky. A hooded character tries to stop two screaming people by giving them a warning gesture. Sage muses that the event should have ended years ago and wonders why it is being mentioned now. Sage listens in surprise as Minso addresses him in a solemn manner. Sage opens his eyes suddenly, expressing strong surprise or shock. Sage stated decisively that he would do it, clenching his fist against a red, tense background. Sage reflects on the Black Tower's attempts to rise and firmly states that the White Tower will not give in under any circumstances. Sage smiles thoughtfully as she stands in a bright room. Sage indignantly asks who summons a spirit to make a contract in place of another person. The huge man demands to calm down, and Sage, in response, is indignant internally and covers her head with her hands in despair. Sage says to tell Minseo, and an image with long golden blonde hair appears in the background. The image shows the face of a man with a thick mustache and a tense expression, with no other characters visible. A character with white hair and butterflies on his face asks who he is, against a backdrop of glowing patterns and flying blue butterflies. The man says with a serious expression that for a common man to receive an order from the Spirit King is incredible. Sage said she had given her permission and the operation would not be a contract but a simple transplant, while the other man with the beard sighed heavily. Sage says she asked him to pass on the message. The image shows a quote that says she reminded him not to forget his old promise. Sage stands at the high door and thinks that he will definitely keep his promise, despite the fact that he could not do it in his past life due to sudden death. Sage looks forward with a slight smile against the backdrop of a bright stained glass window. Sage holds a piece of paper and a piece of jewelry on a chain, studying them intently. The image shows a caption that talks about the need to take better care of the family. The man said that he recognized everyone and thought that they were dead, as he had not seen them for a long time, to which the woman responded with a greeting. A young man wipes his face with a towel while two girls sit at a table and watch him. The woman explains that the lecturer was personally invited by the deputy head of the tower. Minso tells something with a smile, and she with pink hair laughs and is surprised. The three men in white capes turn around, noticing something, and one of them expresses surprise. She raised her hand thoughtfully and spoke, expressing doubt or dissatisfaction in the conversation. The image depicts a young man with golden hair, thoughtfully leaning on his hand, with an inscription below him with the name Demian Prude. The image shows a girl with pink hair saying that finally someone is investing in something. Minso points angrily and says something decisively in the room with shelves and jars. Minso says that out of 32 people, all but one low-level mage came. He says something important with an expression of determination, looking away. Sage and Minseo walk along with another girl, moving forward with concentration as if preparing for an important event. The man suddenly felt a pain in his throat and grabbed his neck in alarm. Sage steps forward on the light floor next to the blue cabinet. Sage says the name Oscar Crushen while standing at the door with a serious expression on his face. A crowd of surprised listeners express bewilderment when they hear that the teacher is a level 2, and one of them says that many are disappointed. She thinks that Sage is aware of the situation, but doubts that a low-level mage could be the lecturer, and assumes that he used magic to prevent them from speaking. He noticed something unexpected and was surprised. Sage stands at a table with a book and a lit candle, looking away thoughtfully, next to a globe in a room with cracked walls. Sage picks up the hourglass, causing a bright glow to appear around it. Sage stands at the lectern, teaching a lesson as several students in white robes listen attentively in the brightly lit room. Sage smiles and looks forward, expressing confidence and calm. Sage stands at the lectern and teaches a lesson while students in white robes listen attentively. 3 people in white robes are sitting on benches. One is indignant that they are forced to remain silent and participate in the lesson despite objections. 3 people are sitting at the table, 2 of them with glowing eyes, and he thinks that the problem of level 2 is definitely not silence and can be solved. He explains that if they can't pick up the spell and cast it, they should take a lesson. Sage sits on her throne and looks at the hourglass, contemplating the passage of time. Sage sits in a chair and looks thoughtfully at an hourglass with blue sand, feeling the passage of time. The young man with blonde hair exclaimed that he had accomplished the task, leaning his hands on the table. Sage looks away thoughtfully and makes an internal note about the child. Sage mentally noted that Demian Prude was smart but stubborn and congratulated him on his achievement. Sage picked up the hourglass and said he was almost done, as students sat at their desks in the classroom. The image shows a young man with blonde hair, smiling and saying something with confidence. Minseo muses that since he lets her do it so easily, she's curious about what she'll learn in class, but she's not too keen on attending. Sage rises from his throne and offers a reward to the only one who can pass the test. Sage stands at the table, and Minso approaches and says the name of the spell, Wind Cutter. Sage releases glowing energy from his hand, creating a powerful vortex in the room. Sage stands surrounded by glowing swords, concentrating on manipulating the magic in the air. Sage smiles thoughtfully, resting his hand on his chin, and prepares to say something. Minso looks at the hand surrounded by glowing energy with concern, trying to understand what is happening in the arched roofed hall. Sage grips the glowing sword tightly in his hand, preparing for action. He watches in amazement as a glowing energy blast emanates from the hand pointed towards him. Sage raised his hand to Minso, who was listening attentively to his words. The image shows a worried young man with blonde hair and red eyes who probably heard or realized something. 3 people stand in a bright room. One warns to be careful. Sage grips the hilt of his sword tightly, preparing for action. Sage says it will be helpful to reduce spending amidst blurry moves. Sage raised his hand to his chin thoughtfully, lost in thought in the quiet room. Minso watches with interest as Sage demonstrates magic, while the child looks on in surprise. A boy with blonde hair struggles to hold on, shaking and screaming with the effort. He asks in surprise how his interlocutor found out this information. Sage covered his eyes tiredly with his hand, and Minso sighed in irritation from behind. As he left, he replied that no one said that he did not accept it. Sage stands in the room and looks at the tense man with golden hair, who is sweating and clearly nervous. Sage asked about the rumors, and Minso was surprised and asked what exactly he meant. He is at the table with a cup and a teapot, raising his finger as if making an important remark. 3 people in white uniforms are sitting at a table. 1 is explaining something, pointing to a book, and 2 are listening to him attentively. Sage looks at Minso in surprise as she sits at the table, his hand resting on the surface in front of him. She stands by the window, looking thoughtfully into the distance, surrounded by other people without saying a word. In a cafe, a waitress brings an order to a group of 3 people, one of whom has his head down on the table. The others are looking at her. 3 students discuss the large number of people and seniors of levels 4 and 5, surprised by their presence today. A man in a white suit with an emblem on his shoulder asks if there is anyone there, expressing surprise. Sage walked into the room and greeted everyone with "Good morning," while the others sat and stood at the tables. 4 young people in white outfits look at something in front of them with delight and surprise, expressing joy and admiration. 4 men in identical uniforms sit at tables, listening intently, with one of them looking worried. The image shows 2 characters expressing boredom and frustration, one thinking it's the most basic thing, and the other thinking it's a waste of time. Minso is surprised that Sage is teaching them such a simple spell that can be mastered even outside the White Tower. The man raised his hand, expressing refusal or stop, and spoke in a serious tone in the bright room with stained glass windows. Sage heard a, okay response from a group of people in the room, watching them with interest. The image shows the word wind against a complex pattern with no characters. Sage calmly explains something to the group, while the others react sharply to a sudden event that causes one of the girls to become frightened. Sage stands at a table in the hall, and 2 listeners react with surprise to his appearance. A voice is heard from outside the window calling Amy Raven's name, and she excitedly replies, "Yes?" Minso says something with surprise and anxiety, sitting at the table and clutching the decoration in his hand. Minso tries to summon the wind, wondering why she was chosen when there are more worthy people around. 2 boys in white suits smile. One of them is surprised by the softness of something, talking about it. Sage explains something while standing at a window with 3 arched openings. She watches thoughtfully from afar while someone nearby says that the atmosphere was different too. She raised her hand to her ear in surprise and said, "Huh?" expressing bewilderment. Sage explains that creatures differ in temperament depending on the mana that created them. Minso and Sage reminisce about 2 people, one of whom was as gentle as the spring breeze. Minso nods nervously, and he smiles, and says that the difference was so big that it is difficult to consider it the same wind. Sage at the board clarifies that he means 4 types of mana: boost, haste, balance, and special. 2 hooded men sit at a table. One raises his hand, explaining that there are 4 systems. Sage writes on the board, and Minso reaches out and starts talking. Sage stands at the board and smiles as a glowing ball appears in his palm. Sage explains that at standard atmospheric pressure, you need a temperature of 100 degrees and a little time, adding that it is simply Sage explains that creating a hot wind is even easier than boiling water, demonstrating magic with his hands. A group of students in uniform sit at their desks. One complains about the heat, while another remarks that it is cold here. Sage explains that water from the blue tower does not mix with oil, and wind has no such restrictions. Against the backdrop of the majestic white tower, a speech is given about the role of the tower's magician. Sage smiles and invites the other person to join the conversation by gesturing towards herself. Sage clenched his fists and said the word wind, and Minso looked at him in surprise. Sage suddenly stopped and exclaimed, asking to wait. A man asks the wind to come to him, and someone asks if the elder's okay, to which he sharply replies no. The image shows a man with pale skin and light hair who appears thoughtful and tense. Someone loudly warns not to touch him. Minseo sharply warned not to touch him, expressing strong defense. Sage stands in front of the seated students and explains something, and one of them asks in surprise why he always behaves like this. Minso closed her eyes in concentration, surrounded by mystical light and symbols, as if preparing for an important ritual or spell. Sage watches with concern as a blonde-haired man looks at something with a concentrated expression in front of shelves of jars. Minseo suddenly hugs Sage, who expresses surprise. Sage smiles with his eyes closed, feeling the blows on his back, and seems a little embarrassed. Sage focuses on repelling attacks, not being distracted by what is happening around her. In the image, the unknown person calls the name Veronica Fricks, and the girl with long hair looks forward intently. Minso explains that she caught the attention of one of the problem children mentioned in Little Oscar's journal. Sage remembers Veronica talking about something interesting in the gym, and in a flashback after class, the girl asks Oscar if he works out, and he confirms. Sage speculates that Minseo was friendly because she enjoyed the lesson, but he wants to understand why she started looking at him with pity again, due to her unfamiliarity with the room. Someone takes a step on the stone pavement and says a short, "Oh." Sage stands in front of a large door and wonders if this is the place. Sage placed his hand on the carved wooden surface, making a soft sound. Sage stands in front of the closed doors and says thoughtfully, Sage stands with his hands on his hips and looks up, ready to say something. Sage notices that the training room is using magic, expressing surprise. Sage thinks the Golden Tower bad guys must be taking all the money. Sage, with a slight irritation on his face, begins to talk about registering user information. Sage stands in front of the large doors and asks what level he is on. Sage confirmed the understanding as 3 glowing orbs descended in front of the castle's massive doors. Sage stands in a stone-walled room, concentrating on manipulating 2 glowing orbs. The image shows 3 bright energy explosions on a gray background, with no visible characters. Sage smiles and begins to speak in a room with stone walls. A warning appears that from level 80, the size of the balls decreases, and the speed and hostility towards the user increases significantly. A character with red hair reads a warning about pausing the trial for pregnant women, the elderly, and children due to unknown dangers. Sage rubs his neck, feeling discomfort after a tense moment in the ancient hall. Sage scratched his neck thoughtfully, standing in a room with tall windows and stone walls. Sage stands silently surrounded by moving orbs as he is warned that using an area effect spell or taking more than 10 hits will cancel the training. Sage reflects multiple glowing blue orbs, creating a protective barrier around himself. He thinks about popping the balloons, but he's afraid the mana will run out soon. Sage directs his hand with concentration, creating magical glowing spheres in a room with stone walls. The image shows glowing spheres falling against a dark background with abstract patterns, with no visible characters. Sage muses that it's effective to make them small and sharp, while sharp balls of energy fly around the room. Sage dodges the incoming energy projectiles and contemplates what is happening. Sage believes this is above and beyond the level of training for children. Sage falls down, surrounded by many glowing projectiles flying towards him inside a large hall. The image shows sound effects of gunshots or explosions with no visible characters. Sage breathes heavily, leaning on his knee, and realizes that he has passed the test. Sage, catching his breath on the floor, said it was a good start to a warm-up. Sage lies and stares thoughtfully at the ceiling, beads of sweat running down his face. Sage performs a magical movement with concentration, kneeling and stretching her arms forward in an empty hall with columns. Sage was surprised to notice that someone had come in the morning, looking at the man who had entered. She asked with a serious expression if the other person thought she had come there to eat, and was surprised that she had not been ignored. Sage explains that healthy mana comes from healthy bodies, and she asks, surprised, what he means. She wonders why someone could have eaten something bad in the morning and why he quoted Sage's famous phrase, passing it off as his own. She says that Argo, level 50, will be a warm-up and throws the helmet on the floor in a large room with a stained glass window. She looks forward with concentration while in the stone hall, seeming to be preparing for an important event. A table with the results appears on the screen, and he says in surprise, AA? She stands behind a transparent screen and announces that they have been defeated. A camera in the corner of the room says that for privacy reasons it cannot reveal the data. Minso asked anxiously if it was Oscar Crushin, and Sage listened attentively to her words. Sage noticed the man approaching and called his name. Sage greeted him in the morning and asked if he had eaten, to which the other person replied that he had just eaten. Sage talks to another man who asks in surprise if this is possible. He is angry and thinking about how to deceive others, while people behind his back discuss Oscar's strange behavior and the long line at the cafe. The man asked where they were going today, to which one of the mailmen replied that he was delivering mail from 1st to 5th Bell Street. Sage stands surrounded by two smiling men and watches them thoughtfully. Sage looks away thoughtfully, lost in his thoughts. Two men are talking, one of them agrees with the other's statement. Sage is sharply focused and stares forward with bright blue eyes, expressing intense surprise or determination. Sage suddenly turns to the man in the hat, who asks in surprise if it's him, Oscar. Sage smiles with slight excitement, expressing surprise or unexpectedness. Sage moved forward sharply, noticing two people in the distance standing on the patterned floor. An elderly man begins a conversation with the word "so" while sitting at a table in a bright room with large windows. Sage smiles and says something in a bright library, surrounded by shiny elements on his clothes. Sage asked Minso for a pen and paper to write down the idea, to which she agreed, repeating the word innovation in surprise. Sage suggests changing the language to make potions more accessible to ordinary citizens and ponders what would be best given their nutritional benefits. The young man happily runs to the older man and says that he has finally arrived. An elderly man happily receives a letter and says that his friend is still alive. A young man in a white uniform talks to an elderly man on a bench who is holding his neck and looks worried. An elderly man looks in surprise at the person sitting in front of him, whose silhouette is partially visible in white and black. He looks at the bottle with interest and says that it is the latest invention of their magic tower. Sage holds a bottle with the word S0 in his hand against a background of flickering lights. He holds a bottle with the words S0 written on it and asks what it means. A young man in uniform happily shows a bottle with the inscription S0, and an elderly man asks a question. An elderly man recalls with amazement how someone was renewed and felt refreshed. A young man in uniform whispers something to an old man on a bench, who reacts to his words with surprise. An elderly man coughs while sitting on a bench in a city park with buildings in the background. Sage claims this isn't the first time it's been tricked by tonic, showing two different bottles of the drink. An elderly man with a cane sits on a bench, and a young man in uniform asks in surprise how he could buy such an expensive thing himself. The image shows a close-up of the ear and eye of an elderly man who is likely listening to something. An elderly man sits thoughtfully on a bench, while another man in a white uniform offers him a bottle of liquid, asking him to make it a little smaller. An elderly man laughs while drinking from a bottle, while a young man in uniform watches him nervously. An elderly man lies in bed and looks up thoughtfully, surrounded by glowing sparks. The internal monologue wonders why something has become so much easier than usual. An elderly man rides a bicycle along a city street, looking thoughtfully ahead. A man on a bicycle greeted two old men at a chess table, explaining that he was absent due to body pain. Sage makes a knight move in a chess game, causing a tense reaction from his opponent. An elderly man smiles and laughs, expressing joy or satisfaction. The elderly man said to let them know while the other concentrated on playing chess. Three elderly men are discussing on the street. One of them thinks that tonic is nonsense. Sage, sitting at a desk with papers and test tubes, reported that there were problems. Sage looks at the newspaper in surprise as someone suddenly lifts it up in front of him. Minso, covering her face with her hands, asks why they are doing this, while Sage sits with her back to her at the table. Minseo looks worried and tense as she stands in a room with architectural elements in the background. Sage, sitting on the throne with a newspaper in his hands, categorically refused, saying that it was impossible. Sage speaks thoughtfully, expressing doubt or confusion in response to what was said earlier. Sage sits and smiles, holding a folder, while Minso explains something, gesturing in front of him in a bright room. Minso addresses Sage, who holds a scroll, in a luxurious room with large windows and decorative elements. Sage sits at a table with a parchment in his hand and explains something, opening his palm in front of him. Sage, holding a scroll, asks about it with a smile in the great hall. Minso reads the scroll in surprise and quietly says, "It." Sage touches his chin thoughtfully as he stands in a room with flaming torches on the walls. Minso expresses dissatisfaction and tension by making a ugh sound and sweating. The image shows a majestic Gothic cathedral with tall spires against a backdrop of mountains and a clear sky. Sage confidently declared the matter complete, standing with his arms crossed in front of the mirror. The man, the head of the potions department, calls Moira Main, who confirms his request. Two men are talking in a room, one holding a scroll with a serious expression and the other smiling back. The image shows a man in a blue trench coat sharply slapping another man across the face, expressing anger or determination. She carefully picks up the newspaper from the floor, studying its contents intently. Sage reads the paper with concern and wonders if he really gave up all the profits for such results. Sage reads the newspaper and thinks that it is not about potions, but about tonics, which he could not help but notice on the market. Sage realized that due to the current situation, the data was not being taken into account in the overall sales volume of the market. Sage reads the newspaper with Oscar Crushen's statement and exclaims that it is a scam. Sage reads the newspaper intently as the other man walks away, ignoring him. Sage taps his finger on the surface, preparing to say or do something. Sage listens intently as another man in a blue trench coat explains data on a graph while holding a complex device. Sage is horrified to hear he is told that even working without pay for life would not be enough. Shown is the eastern side of the continent, the Yang Dynasty, where a city can be seen in the mountains and an explosion occurs below. The hostile creature lets out a loud cry and delivers a powerful blow, expressing rage and strength. Several warriors prepare to fight the giant. One of them orders to block the attack and not let the enemy reach the village. Sage orders the 9-cloud wind dragons formation to be formed immediately as one of the warriors is sent flying backwards from the impact. Two men in green clothes with weapons react with caution to a sudden powerful blow accompanied by a loud sound. The monster screams in panic, asking what they should do now. Sage stares at the sharp blade, and he watches him with concern as the leaf floats between them. Several people in green clothes look up with concern. One supports an unconscious comrade, holding him in his arms. Minso makes a swift jump, surrounded by onlookers in green uniforms. The character in the white hood decisively declares that he will return the interlocutor to the ground. On a dark background with sparks, the name Innate Magic glows brightly, creating an atmosphere of magic and mystery. The image depicts a muscular man with fangs surrounded by a vortex of energy against a red background, with the caption, "Restless Wind." A character in a white hooded cloak notices that this is happening more and more often, standing in front of explosions and several people. Sage and Minso encounter a woman in a white hooded cloak in the forest, who suddenly appears before them. In the image, the hand is tightly gripping Minso's hand, expressing tension or resistance in the moment. The image shows a woman with red hair, dressed in black and white, introduced as the Master of the White Tower, Shasha Meist. A man asks a woman if he understood correctly that this is the Empire's bulletin, showing her the newspaper. She reads the newspaper in surprise, noticing something unexpected. He holds a newspaper and admits that he's afraid to read it. Sage is worried that their tower could go bankrupt in the 2 months he's been away, and that they could be permanently excluded from the 4 main magic towers. Sage muses that if this really happened, he will never be able to see the master, even if he dies. She reads the newspaper with a tense expression on her face, while her hand clutches the fabric of her clothes. She reads the newspaper in surprise. Question marks and exclamation marks appear above her head. She turns the pages of the newspaper quickly with surprise against the backdrop of the stars. Minso reads the newspaper in surprise, and Sage exclaims, "What?" Sage's thoughts are focused on the fact that, everything else aside, delivery is still going well. The image shows a worried girl with red eyes who reflects on how she did not plan for her business to be successful and did not start it for that reason. Sage explains that he had another goal when he did it. The man in green answers in agreement, and she with red hair holds a scroll and looks at him. The moment is shown when a glowing object with a symbol rises into the sky above the trees. Sage wonders what is happening in the White Tower now. She is determined to check it out for herself, floating in the air in a white hooded cloak. Minso reacts to what he heard with surprise and bewilderment, crossing his arms over his chest. Sage sits on a carved chair and turns back as if hearing something important. Minseo asked Sage if the reaction was good as he sat at a table in a room with arched windows. Minso raised her hand to her chin thoughtfully and said, She looks forward with a slight smile, expressing calm and confidence. Sage asks if this has to do with him being the head of the potion production department. Sage smiles and addresses his interlocutor in a room with stone architecture. The image shows a mystical book with locks and an intricate pattern on the cover against a shimmering background. Sage leans tiredly against the table, closing his eyes and sighing deeply. Sage sits thoughtfully at a table in a luxurious room, deep in thought. The scene shows an empty part of the room with a cobweb on the wall, with no characters visible. Sage stretches while standing by the door in a bright room, expressing mild dissatisfaction or fatigue. Sage raised his hand to his head and made a "nuh" sound, expressing surprise or confusion. The man joyfully exclaimed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and the woman said the name Schwein in surprise. Sage looks thoughtful, holding a fork with a piece of food as if thinking about something important. The image shows a plaque with an inscription about the White Tower Elder, the Schwein-Koch theory mage, with no visible characters. Sage, with his head in his hands, asks if he should have stayed in the room, while Minso and he sit at the table with cups of tea. Minseo looks at the man in surprise, who lowers his head and holds it, clearly experiencing great anxiety or pain. Sage, adjusting his collar, begins to speak while sitting across the table from another person. Sage reacts with doubt to Minseo's words about him reaching level 2 and expresses surprise. The man smiles and she corrects him, saying that it was earlier. Sage said something calmly, standing at the window with a stained glass window in the background. Sage asks with interest if they won the lottery, and the interlocutor replies that one can assume so, watching the 3 people walking in white robes. 3 people are sitting at a table. One man is smiling and talking, and another with dark hair answers with the question, Sage touches her lips thoughtfully and reflects on what is happening in the bright room with a stained glass window. The man explains that he is good at this, and the woman points her finger in surprise, expressing her opinion. Sage, raising his hands, tries to calm down and says, "Whoa, whoa," expressing tension and caution. Against the backdrop of a majestic tower, it is said that even when looking at the same thing, perceptions can differ. The image shows a top-down view of a city with numerous buildings, streets, and canals with no visible characters. The image shows Archmage Oscar Sage against a golden background with an inscription emphasizing his title and name. Sage stands inside the building and begins to speak, addressing someone out of frame. Sage adjusts his tie while standing in the library and feels a hand touch him, expressionless. Sage reports that 7 years have passed and he has found a mage who meets all the necessary conditions for magic theory, fame, status, and age. Sage smiles as he holds a black envelope in his hands, looking like he has something important to share. Sage smiles and makes a sound of surprise when he notices something interesting. Sage, sitting on a chair, confidently said that he would do his best. The focus is on the inscription, "This is it," emphasizing a decisive moment or important event. Sage writes something in a notebook while standing in front of a pentagram symbol. Sage looks thoughtfully at the hand holding the pen that is writing and thinks, Sage is surprised that a level 2 solves the problem so quickly, and muses that it is impossible without the thinking and knowledge of a high mage. Sage writes something with a pen on paper, holding the instrument in his hand with concentration. Sage looks at the decoration in surprise, saying to himself, "This." Sage draws on a tablet in the library, lost in thought. Sage smiles and holds out the book, inviting you to explore its contents. Sage looks at the document intently, holding it in his hand, and appears to be lost in thought. Sage sits in a chair and carefully flips through documents, lost in his thoughts. Sage studies the documents with surprise and tension, thinking that everything is correct for now. Minso is surprised at how impressive Sage's arithmetic skills can be, considering he did all the calculations in his head while only being a level 2. He looks at something in front of him with concern. A drop of sweat runs down his face, expressing his worry. Sage stands in a room and looks away attentively, waiting or listening to someone. A man carefully reads a document with mysterious symbols while sitting against a patterned carpet. Sage holds the phone with a shaky hand, clearly feeling nervous or anxious. The image shows a man with green hair carefully reading a note, his gaze expressing surprise and concentration. The image shows a glowing golden dragon coiled in space, creating a bright glow and a magical atmosphere. Sage asks in surprise how the glow and interweaving of luminous threads in the room happened. Sage explains something with surprise, and standing next to him he smiles, while a golden pattern glows in front of them. Sage listens in surprise as he is asked to co-author a dissertation and thanks him for it by squeezing the other man's hand. Sage reacts with surprise and alarm to something he notices in his surroundings. Sage extends his hand and smiles, inviting with a friendly intonation. The magical golden serpent Ouroboros is created, and it is revealed that it was created by the master of the Tower of Magic, Oscar Sage. Sage looks up thoughtfully, surrounded by shimmering sparks in a room with wooden elements. Sage ponders a magic that only requires mana once and theoretically creates an infinite source of energy. The image shows an infinity symbol against an abstract pattern with no characters present. A man drives a horse-drawn carriage as it races across a green field under a clear sky. The image shows a sailing ship with white sails against a blue sky and green land, accompanied by text about the conquest of land and water. The image shows a large sailing ship sailing on the sea under a bright sun with no visible characters on board. A giant glowing kite, symbolizing the goal of the Blue Sky Project, sparkles in the sky above the airship. The image shows a man with long blonde hair standing with his back to a bright sky and sun. The sailboat comes under fire. There are explosions and fire all around, but neither Sage nor Minso are visible in the image. The background of the airship is marked in large letters with the words "Project Discarded," emphasizing the abandonment of the project. Sage looks up in surprise at the smiling man with green hair who radiates joy and calm. An inner voice or thought warns that no matter how much Shasha misses her owner, it will not change the situation. Someone wonders how it is possible to make it recover without deciding how to use it, and another begins to object. Sage raised his hand with a smile, as if greeting or calling for something, while in the library. Sage asks about the past with a worried expression in a library with a high ceiling and bookshelves. Sage asks if the wind is created by this magic, and Minso replies that it is based on records from the past. Sage looks forward with a serious expression, as if he's about to say something important. Sage confidently placed his hand on the table with the scrolls and lantern, declaring that they had it. Sage exclaims in delight at the magical engineering device depicted in the background. Sage exclaimed about magical engineering, expressing surprise or admiration. The image shows a large metal vessel with liquid inside and a stream falling from above with no visible characters. At night on the city streets, the light from a car's headlights illuminates a building, and behind the scenes, the key to magical engineering is mentioned. Sage talks about magical engineering and suggests using Ouroboros energy to power an airship. Sage looks surprised and notices something that suddenly appears. Sage suggests using a battery to continuously increase mana, thinking about the possibilities of such an approach. Sage asked in surprise about the research. Sage addresses Minso in the library, explaining something with mild surprise and an open palm. The picture shows a train, and at the bottom it says that it is called a train. Sage looks thoughtfully at the glowing pattern, pondering its meaning. A giant glowing kite appears in the sky above the airship, creating a tense atmosphere before an unexpected event. A man with green hair speaks calmly while standing in a library with shelves of books in the background. A large airship floats in the sky under the bright sun, surrounded by clouds and a light haze. Against the background of the sky, it is said that this is the sky that no one has been able to conquer. Sage speaks calmly with his eyes closed against a clear sky. Sage stares straight ahead against the golden light, expressionless. Sage stares, his bright blue eyes reflecting the starry sky. Sage said that he must open the way as her master, addressing the green-haired man in the library. The image shows a close-up of a man's face with a surprised expression and an exclamation mark next to it. Sage stands silently, his mouth slightly open against the pink light, expressing mild surprise or thoughtfulness. Sage looks away with a slight smile against a warm, glowing background. Sage says the actual presence is more impressive than the abstract idea, to which Minso agrees. Sage picks up an old book with thick pages in front of a shelf with other volumes. Sage handed the book to another man in a white coat, starting a conversation. Sage reads the book carefully, concentrating on studying its contents. Sage looks worried and says something while standing against a backdrop of stairs and bookshelves. Sage sits with a book and thinks about the formulas of the Ouroboros technique, while another man stands nearby in a room with patterned floors and furniture. Sage speaks enthusiastically as Minso smiles back in the library. Sage looks worried and sweats slightly as he stands in a room with bookcases and wood paneling. Sage is surprised and wonders why someone would apologize for bringing back magic, trying to understand the reasons for such behavior. Sage said he was scared for a second, but now he's okay. Sage explained something to a man sitting across from her in a library, spreading her arms in a gesture of uncertainty. Minseo admits he's afraid of the Golden Tower and fears for his life. Sage, holding the book, admitted that he was more afraid of this. The image shows a close-up of a man with green hair looking ahead intently while in a brightly lit room. Sage says something serious, his face partially visible against the backdrop of the room with hanging herbs. Sage explains that the White Tower has no power. The image shows thoughts or speech that talks about the losses of the potion market, the contract with the army, and observing the Golden Tower's actions in magic research. Sage, with closed eyes and smiling, says something confidently against the bright light. Sage smiles and touches her lips thoughtfully in front of bookshelves. Sage extends his hand as if inviting to something important. Sage and the other man shake hands, and he suggests working well together in the future. Minso begins to talk about an object surrounded by a shining golden ornament. Sage speculates that the Weiler equation added to the technique appears to reduce its effectiveness. Sage asked about the magical output, to which Minseo responded that he believed it was, discussing the details next to the glowing magical energy. Sage, with his eyes closed and a bead of sweat on his face, looks worried or thoughtful. Sage warns that changing one piece of technology could lead to errors as he and another man pore over scattered documents. Two men are sitting on the floor among scattered papers. One asks if a parallel system is being formed. The other reacts in surprise. Sage says they've already missed 2 meals and offers to take the food, to which the other person reacts with surprise. Sage leaned towards the seated man with green hair, who looked at him in surprise. Sage thanks the other person for the words, and the other person replies that he would have finished what he started, against the backdrop of a glowing golden object. Sage suddenly turned his attention to something, expressing surprise. The green-haired man is surprised that the magic has reached its full form so quickly. Sage looks up at a glowing chandelier surrounded by shimmering particles. Sage smiles awkwardly as another man laughs next to him. Sage smiles and says something in a bright room surrounded by flickering sparks. Sage stands in front of an old man at a table in a bright room with large windows, having an important conversation. An elderly man folds his hands thoughtfully on a table with papers, talking to an interlocutor whose head is visible at the bottom of the frame. An elderly man with long gray hair smiles and says that they couldn't do something. Sage tells the seated man that the meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Sage says Frick's name with a displeased expression, clearly feeling annoyed. Sage thoughtfully suggested that it might be a good idea to inspire each other. A man in a gray robe bows politely to an old man sitting at a table in a library. Minseo thinks the slugs are just an excuse, and Sage wants her to give advice, noting that he seems innocent but is actually very insightful. She says with a serious expression, crossing her arms, looking towards the window. Sage stands by the carriage and tells someone inside to be quiet, without seeing their face. A carriage with 2 horses drives down an empty street past a large building. Sage sits in a train carriage and looks surprised when he notices something outside the window. Sage sits quietly and listens as Minso explains something, gesturing with his hand as they talk in a room with wooden walls and windows. Sage smiles and says something to his interlocutor in a room with wooden walls. Minso is in pain or irritation, which is expressed by the sound ugh and a tense look. She sits with her legs and arms crossed with a tense expression, making a sound of displeasure. Sage covers her eyes with her hand, as if trying to hide or concentrate, against a decorative frame. Sage smiles as he remembers playing with a cat who got scared and made a kiak sound. She looks forward with concentration. A drop of sweat is visible on her face, expressing tension or anxiety. Sage tells the group that he was frustrated by his inability to imitate, which is why he trained without sleep, and the current questions do not count as training. Minso thinks that he is compensating for her lack of sleep. Minso looks at the approaching hand with a stick. A cat jumps cautiously nearby. Sage tries to hide his laughter as a kitten touches his nose. Sage said he couldn't achieve that kind of temperament, despite practicing while sitting opposite Minseo in a room with windows. She speaks decisively, expressing strong emotions and conviction in her words. Sage smiles and says something in a calm environment, the light softly illuminating his face. Sage sits, smiling and talking to a person standing in front of him in a room with wooden walls and a window. Sage speaks calmly with his eyes closed in a warmly lit room. Minso told Sage that he wasn't warm during their conversation by the window. She looks away thoughtfully as she stands by the window in a softly lit room. Minso stands by the window in a wooden-walled room. light streaming in but her words not visible. Minso walks forward confidently, while Sage stretches and expresses fatigue. Sage looks worried and raises his hands, preparing to say or do something. Minso points his hand at the green slimes that rise into the air, while Sage watches from behind. The slug-like creature takes a powerful hit, screaming and appearing to be damaged or destroyed. Sage reflects on Oscar's high praise for Minso and admires her incredible super-fast acceleration spell combo. Minso quickly casts spells that would take a level 5 mage at least 7 seconds to concentrate and cast. Sage muses that it would be good to develop her as a spellcaster like Majiro. The image shows a mage named Majiro Wilson smiling and pointing, while Sage stands thoughtfully below. The image shows a woman with long brown hair and a ponytail, surrounded by an ominous purple aura, and expressing anxiety or anger. Minso attacks the green creature while Sage watches the action. Sage calmly stops the green slime's attack using the amulet and reacts to what is happening. Sage looks closely at the green slime-like creatures and quietly says, Minso, raising his hands in a defensive gesture, addresses the interlocutor standing next to him. On the floor lie 2 greenish drop-shaped entities, making a sound similar to gurgling. Sage stands back and explains that because they lack intelligence, they are more loyal. She stands with her hand on her hip and listens attentively, preparing to respond to what is said. Sage urges hurry as Minso prepares for action on green energy. Inside the energy room, energy flows are visible, but the characters are missing. Someone asks in surprise what it is, and another explains that it is a white silkworm cocoon. Minso and Sage stand in front of a huge glowing ball surrounded by energy and watch it intently. Sage and the woman with long hair look away with worry and tension on their faces. She looks worried and sweats, looking away against the backdrop of a red grill. Sage and Minso stand together in front of glowing lines, and he says, "The news is most important." Minso gently holds Sage, who is leaning forward, and she says that it is wrong. She stands alertly with her hand raised while another person's hand touches the grill of a car with a building in the background. Minso orders to prepare for battle, and he expresses dissatisfaction with the situation. The image shows a dialogue that says, "This one is suitable." The image shows a glowing large butterfly with golden wings surrounded by glow and motion effects. She covered her eyes with her hands and exclaimed that it was disgusting, and he looked forward with a neutral expression. She covers her face with her hands, peering through her fingers with alarm. Sage noticed that she looked ill, and she held back the vomit, trying not to show weakness. Sage concentrates on creating a magical message that radiates light between his crossed hands. He thinks about reinforcement, looking at his open palms from which glowing energy emanates. She raised her hand and declared that she had completed the task, with the glowing magic circle in the background. Sage angrily called his opponent an insect and used the wind press technique, causing a bright flash of energy. She activates her jet booster ability, preparing to dash forward. He jerks his collar sharply, expressing surprise and saying, "Kek?" Sage suddenly grabbed Minso and threw her to the ground with force. Sage extends his hand, emitting magical energy against a red glow. Minso warns that he almost died and notices that the silkworm is gone. A glowing butterfly flies over a building, and he wonders how it noticed the powder, which is not even visible. She looks at him with concern, sitting with his back to him in a dark room with industrial equipment. Sage stares ahead with a focused expression, glowing energy radiating from his eye. The wings create a strong wind, and someone asks to install a windshield first. The glowing moth emits a bright light, accompanied by the words that training will come later. Sage and Minso collide in a bright burst of energy, creating a powerful light effect between them. The image shows smoke and the sound of an explosion against the backdrop of a building, with no characters present. Sage assesses the situation as bad, thinking that after one block he has lost 70% of his mana and will not be able to block the next attack. He thinks about the relief that there is a 5-minute delay between beam shots. Sage turned around sharply, noticing something behind him against the backdrop of the haze in the building. She looks anxiously at the wound on her thigh, trying to figure out what's going on. Sage speculates that when the beam was blocked earlier, its fragment should have... Sage said she should go first as he could buy time despite his condition, and they both sat on the floor in a red-lit room. She lowered her head and the air around her began to tremble. He put his hand on the head of another man who looks tense and worried. Minso watches with concern as Sage covers her face with his hand, trying to shield her from the light or danger. Sage stands with his back turned and reaches his hand back, as if he's about to take or hide something. Sage thinks to himself that he has about 28% mana left, resting his hand on the ground. He thinks he has to finish it with one breath. She screams "No!" in panic as she watches the glowing lines move rapidly on the metal floor. Sage rushes forward, surrounded by glowing lines of energy. The image shows hands emitting glowing energy, with no characters visible. Sage falls, thinking that it's a good thing he took the necessary thing with him. Sage, lying on his back with a gun, asked if the other man was still calm. Sage aims his weapon as a bright light comes out, looking ahead with concentration. Sage screams and deflects a fire blast aimed at a giant light butterfly. Sage is surprised that he got a dislocation after one shot, even though he couldn't even aim at the enemy's head. Sage noticed something unexpected and reacted tensely, a bead of sweat running down his face. The image shows a glowing moth with damage, and at the bottom it says that its beam attack has already been restored. A glowing column of energy explodes, sending rocks and dust flying into the air as someone with wings expresses surprise. Sage explains that the creature was thinking about escape from the start, being on a giant hand next to a flying moth. He thinks he doesn't have enough mana to pursue the target. Sage looks at a butterfly as it flies through a hole in the ceiling of a room. Sage exclaimed that it was a silk thread, showing it against the backdrop of the building. Sage jumps and fires his gun while shouting Cute's name. The fist squeezes the rope with force, creating a tense moment in the scene. Sage suddenly exclaimed as he noticed something and reached his hand forward against the reddish lighting. Someone exclaims indignantly, asking if he is really going to grab something, against the backdrop of a broken roof in rapid movement. Sage falls back, clutching his pistol in his hand, ready to attack or defend. The image shows a large insect making a loud key sound. Sage reports he gets motion sickness while flying. The image shows a strange creature with sharp teeth and tentacles opening up and emitting a loud scream. Sage falls from a height, making a sound of pain against the backdrop of the sunset sky. Sage, floating in the air with a weapon in his hand, addresses someone, calling him an insect. Sage releases glowing energy from his fingers, creating a sudden effect. The image shows the moment of attack with the monster's mouth open, accompanied by a cry of "Land another blow." Sage falls down holding a weapon against a sunset sky and a landscape with buildings. Sage fires his pistol, saying that the enemy only has one chance. Sage said with a smile that he had won. Sage fires, creating a powerful explosion that rips apart the ground around him. Sage lies out of breath and with dirt on his face, against an industrial landscape. The sounds of dripping liquid can be heard. Sage falls backwards with a smile, holding a gun in his hand as an explosion occurs. Someone loudly casts the spell, Air Cushion, Hand of Gust. She, while on her knees, creates a magical shield, protecting herself from attack. A glowing column of energy shoots out from the ceiling, bouncing off large blue hands. Minso panics and calls for help as Sage falls to the ground, holding a gun in his hand. Sage is lying unconscious on the floor, and Minso's hand is visible next to him as if she's trying to help him. Sage with wide eyes expresses strong surprise or shock. Sage gets hit hard in the face with a loud bang. Sage worriedly asks Minso if she is safe when she approaches him worriedly. Minso is surprised to learn of the dislocations of the lying man, who explains that Veronica is hitting him, while the third man expresses bewilderment. Against the backdrop of a tall building, one of the characters noted that an article had already appeared. Minso handed the letter to Sage, who was sitting in bed with a stick by the bed. Sage reads the newspaper carefully, concentrating on the text on the pages. She expressed surprise, saying it was unexpected. A loud bang is heard in the room with the beds, followed by the words, "More than this." He said the name Frank with surprise and alarm to someone outside the door. Sage looks forward thoughtfully, his bright blue eyes reflecting concentration. He reflects that someone's gaze has become deeper, and now he can be considered a true fourth-level magician. Sage tries to explain, but Minso angrily refuses to listen, showing irritation. Minso angrily yells at Sage, who listens to her in surprise with a red, angry cat background. She sighs and touches her head, expressing irritation or fatigue. Sage looks surprised and confused, as if trying to understand what is happening around him. Sage, lying in bed, answers yes while Minso stands next to him and looks at him. He smiles and speaks to his interlocutor against a wooden wall. Sage and the woman with long hair look in surprise at the man in the white coat standing in front of them. Minso looks with displeasure at the smiling Sage, who seems to be cheerfully telling something. Sage asks the man lying in bed about the condition of his body and arms as Minso leaves with crutches, and he calls her to wait. Sage hands Minso a red box with a gold pattern and a large stone on the lid. Sage opens a red box from which a bright glow emanates. Sage, holding a red box with a ring in his hands, looks at the hand extended to him in surprise. Sage, standing in front of the man sitting on the bed, asks, "What about Veronica?" holding an open box. A man with blonde hair smiles and looks forward, expressing mild approval or friendliness. Sage touches his nose with his fingers, looking ahead intently. Sage stares ahead with concentration, a green glow flickering around him, creating a tense atmosphere. Sage meditates with concentration, eyes closed, emitting a mysterious aura and making sounds similar to sayaya. He is amazed by the mastery of handling the pure mana of the elixir, watching its manifestation in his hands. Sage and Minseo tenderly hold hands, creating an atmosphere of closeness and support. Sage stretches, smiling, and says it's the best morning she's had in a long time. Sage sits up in bed and stretches while Minseo stands next to him, watching him. Sage lies in bed and looks out the window thoughtfully, lost in his thoughts. Sage picked up the object on the table and thoughtfully said, Sage sits on the bed and carefully disassembles the gun, intently checking its condition. Sage stands with a briefcase in his hand in front of a building and says, "Power plant." Sage stands in a room with a backlight behind him, and another person's leg is visible in front of him. Minseo handed over the card and said everything was fine, introducing herself as Nebula Grime of the royal family. Sage reads the letter with surprise and anxiety against the backdrop of the night sky and building. Sage looks away and smiles, expressing calm and confidence. Sage shook his interlocutor's hand doubtfully and said that it was possible if he was from the royal family. Sage greeting someone by smiling and raising her hand to her forehead against the night sky. A bright glow of purple and blue sparks appears in the large hall, accompanied by a loud sound. Two men are walking on a wooden floor. One of them says that one of them has reached the 3rd level. Sage and Minseo discuss the battle site where the silkworm underwent a metamorphosis, observing the glowing energy streams. Sage reflects on the mana being concentrated in a creature called a silkworm, and remembers that one of the White Tower's mages started the battle first. Sage stands amidst glowing streams of energy and reflects on the incredible speed of movement. Sage sees a glowing silhouette and thinks she has been injured. Sage looks down thoughtfully, lost in thought in a dark room. Sage ponders how he can't see his opponent's form, only their movements, and wonders how they can move without wasting mana. Sage stands in a dark room and notices a glowing blue trail on the floor, expressing surprise. Sage steps on the ground, next to a fired bullet and sparkling blue smoke. Sage thinks to himself that this is a weapon, and a pistol at that, as he watches the marks on the floor. Sage looks away thoughtfully, lost in thought. Minseo is surprised that he followed the silkworm as it flew into the sky. The internal monologue notes that level 4 is distinguished by outstanding courage and audacity. On a dark street, a man in a suit called out the name Veronica Fricks to a man in a white cloak standing behind him. Man in suit smiling and starting to talk against building background at night. Sage appears worried and begins to speak while in an industrial space. Sage looks ahead intently, his eyes reflecting deep thought and concentration. Sage is surprised that only a level 2 could leave a trace of such power and does not believe it. He thought for a moment and remembered the name Oscar Crushen, noting its strange familiarity. Sage realized the importance of the vaccine while looking at an image of the virus in a building, then shook hands with another man in front of the architecture. Sage stands with a briefcase and addresses a man in a white coat, asking for help or support. Man thoughtfully covers mouth with hand while standing against building in darkness. Sage is surprised that a second-tier mage can wield a powerful weapon and ponders the possible physical abilities of the wielder. Sage gestures for someone to come over without saying a word. Minseo wonders what kind of person he is. Sage reads the book out loud with a look of doubt and surprise on his face. Sage is surprised and asks why all the books are in this condition. Sage looks at the books in the tower library and thinks that the condition of the books is more appropriate for a regular bookstore rather than a magical library. The library with ancient books features a ceiling painted with an angel, symbolizing the preservation of knowledge over hundreds of years. Sage holds the book in his hands and suddenly squeezes it, expressing surprise. Sage looks up thoughtfully, lost in thought. The idea in the library is that he didn't expect to be guilty of this. Sage stands in a room with books and listens attentively without expressing emotions. Against the backdrop of a tall tower, there are many hooded men, one of whom says that 20 years ago they fought the high priest on the night of purification. She writes with a serious expression and claims that she entrusted the task to Edna Saul Laplace. He stands at a table in the library and places his hand on a stack of books, looking thoughtfully at the shelves of books. In the image, Minso asks Edna what she's doing, and she replies that she's going to get everything organized before bed. Sage stands in the library next to the cart, looking away thoughtfully and pondering his thoughts. A man watches a woman searching for a book on a shelf in a library, lost in thought. Sage stands on the library balcony and addresses a woman with books who happily answers him. A man descends the stairs and a woman warns that someone will take him. Sage watches in relief as the bespectacled girl happily says, "Dragon." Sage stopped in surprise when the woman exclaimed, "Ouch!" as she picked up a book from the shelf, and he asked her to wait. Woman with dark hair taking book from shelf and smiling while in library. Sage is surprised and wonders why everything around him seems like a picture book. He smiles and shows a book called The Brave Mage and the Coward Lizards. A man listens anxiously to a woman in glasses who shows him a scroll in a library. He looks closely at the book with a picture of a dragon on the cover and expresses interest. Sage reflects on the dragon stalking her people who left first, and how there has been no news from her since the war. She stands with her back to the dragons as they fly away, reflecting on her disappointment in those who escaped her kind. Sage looks away thoughtfully, as if about to say something. Minseo reported that all the external fees requested by the magicians have been completed, adding that she feels very emotional. 3 smiling people are talking at a table. An old man is holding a cup, and 2 others are laughing and exchanging words. A man says something with a slight smile while in an elegant room. Elderly man with long gray hair sighing in relief while holding cup of tea in library. Minso advises not to blame yourself too much while sitting with 2 men in a luxurious library. An elderly man drinks tea without saying a word, surrounded by bookshelves and antiques. Against the backdrop of glowing magical symbols, it is said that 20 years ago there were 64 types of advanced magic, all of which were considered exquisite. 2 men in white robes drink tea and discuss this guy while sitting opposite each other at a marble table. Sage holds the cup of drink carefully, looking at it intently. She listens attentively to her interlocutor, expressing a serious attitude towards the conversation. Sage turned in surprise to Minso, who was sitting quietly next to him, showing no emotion. The man asks worriedly if there's a problem. She looks anxiously at the man standing next to her, and it seems like there is a tense conversation going on between them. An elderly man with white hair and beard looks worried and sweats while standing in a bright room with large windows. The man says he's going to the communications room, and the woman insists on doing it quickly, discussing the child's level. Minso stated that he is still a mage who needs protection. Sage opened the car door against the backdrop of illuminated buildings in the city at night, and smiled. Sage walks down the sidewalk and thinks this place was a wasteland 30 years ago. Sage muses that he would be able to navigate better if the way was more sensibly marked while standing outside at night. Sage looks forward thoughtfully and begins to speak, addressing his interlocutor. Sage suddenly appears in front of a man with long blonde hair who expresses surprise. A man with a tattoo on his face listens intently, his gaze focused and serious. Sage stands in front of a man with silver hair who calls him Oscar. Sage looks forward thoughtfully and begins to speak, addressing his interlocutor. He reflects on the Tower of Azure and suggests that its inhabitants were waiting for an opportunity to take revenge, and also estimates the mage to be at least a 4th level based on his mana. Sage ponders the persistence of his pursuers and asks what will happen if he refuses, to which the interlocutor replies that he will have to be taken away by force. Sage says thoughtfully, "Then," as he stands outside in the evening. Sage attacks quickly, and he defends himself with an energy shield, preparing for a collision. Sage clenches his fist, creating a powerful explosion of energy around him. Sage stands in the center of a glowing circle with his hands covering his eyes, while another man with white hair clenches his fist, preparing for action. Sage falls backwards in a fiery explosion, letting out a cry of pain. Sage dropped to his knees and someone reached out to help him up. The image shows a frightened man with tattoos on his face who exclaims in surprise or fear. Sage grabs the clothes sharply, causing tension in the moment. Sage suddenly grabs the opponent's cloak and strikes, showing determination in the fight. Sage lands hard on the ground with a loud thud, and someone shouts his name. Sage is lying on the floor, coughing, and he runs quickly down the hallway towards him. He sits on the cracks in the ground in front of the building and looks back. Sage decided he needed to fight seriously and prepared to fight on the street outside the building. Sage looks up, looking thoughtful and ready to say something. Sage rushes forward, leaving trails of energy behind him and destroying everything in his path. Sage carefully touches the surface next to Minso, who is sitting in a blue outfit. Sage rushes forward, thinking it's not acceleration, but a jet booster. A man with a tattoo on his face ponders the speed of the spell and is confident he can parry it. Sage delivers a powerful kick to the grounded opponent, showing off his speed. Sage slams into the wall, surrounded by an explosion and flying debris. Sage falls to his knees, surrounded by dust and debris, with Minso standing nearby. Sage, leaning against the wall, said with a smile that the interlocutor should have fainted from what happened. A man with white hair raises his arm and leg in concentration, surrounded by mystical smoke and energy. Sage raises his hand in concentration, causing glowing energy to form around him. Sage clenches his fist in concentration and says he is revealing himself. Sage clenches his fist, preparing for action at the beginning of Chapter 1. The image shows the sound of waves crashing on the shore, with no visible characters. Sage notices the sound of the waves and jumps to attack, and he raises his hand in response. Sage punches the air, and someone is surprised and thinks that he has given up. Sage expresses disappointment when a bright glow suddenly erupts from the book. With blood coming from his mouth and wounds on his face, he clenches his teeth, showing determination and strength in an intense fight scene. Sage falls from a great height, hitting the side of a building with force and a loud bang. Sage lets out a loud scream while standing surrounded by glowing green rings in a brick-walled room. Sage lands with force, causing an explosion on the ground. A man with white hair lies in a trash container and begins to cough. Sage approaches a man lying on a trash can and asks what principle this technique uses. The man concentrates on creating a frequency that resonates with the opponent's body frequencies, causing a strong reaction in him. The man explains that the vibrations of different entities are amplified at one frequency, causing fatal destruction of the enemy's internal organs when the wave hits. Sage uses the force to push back his attacker, creating waves of energy that knock him off his feet. Sage approaches the man lying on the ground and asks if he is really that strong. Sage says they met several times. Someone suddenly says, "Wait," breaking the silence at the corner of the building. Sage asks the wounded man the name of the person looking for him. A white and gray cat with a kitten in its mouth stands between a man's legs on the street against the backdrop of city buildings. Sage asks what will happen if he refuses, to which Minso replies that he will have to be dragged there by force. Sage, clutching his head in despair, thinks that he lacks even basic communication skills. Sage feels a sense of déjà vu as black liquid starts coming out of his mouth. Minso wonders why he has such annoying communication skills, and the way he speaks seems familiar to her. Sage stands in front of a wounded man with a tattoo on his face, lying on a dumpster, watching him. Sage stands against a brick wall, sweating thoughtfully and pondering his thoughts. The image shows a man with white hair and tattoos on his face, who confirms something with the word "yup." Sage appears tense and focused, his eyes wide, expressing alarm or shock. Man in lion mask with tattooed arms laughing while standing against forest background. Sage came to the White Tower and demonstrated an absurd level of communication skills, causing confusion in Minso. Sage covered his face with his hand, expressing strong internal tension or pain. Two men are sitting against the wall. One says he took it out. Sage looks closely at a man with tattoos on his face, who is saying something while standing against a brick wall. The image shows a man with silver hair and a facial tattoo looking away while standing in front of a brick wall. Sage, sitting against the wall, said he thought he was supposed to be sent back to Siren. A man with a scar on his face sits silently next to him. Sage, with closed eyes and a smile, expresses slight irritation or fatigue against the backdrop of rain. Against a brick wall, a man with long silver hair and a tattoo on his face raises his finger, making an important remark. She extends her hand forward as if calling or directing something against the backdrop of a large building and blue sky. Sage said his job was to protect Minso. Sage bangs his fist on the door, expressing determination and tension. The image shows a man with dark hair and glasses addressing someone by saying the name Evelyn. She opens the door, holding the handle tightly, preparing to enter. He smiles and says that it must be. Sage and Minso walk around the room, noticing feet tapping rhythmically on the sofa. She, with long pink hair, sits on the couch, reading a book in surprise and suddenly notices something. He looks away with tattoos on his face and starts talking. Sage stands in a formal suit with a bow tie, his face partially visible against a light interior with a plant. She said pleasantly that she was glad to meet you, surrounded by pink flowers. She lies among the flowers and introduces herself as Marin Maria. Sage is surprised that his reinforced shield broke from the blow without using mana. Sage runs, thinking that if he loses the lead, it's all over, and in the distance stands Minso. The image shows a powerful kick flying at high speed in an urban environment. A man with a tattoo on his face said, "What is this?" in surprise at the sudden event. The image shows a powerful explosion with bright flashes and dynamic lines, conveying the power and energy of the event. The man with long blonde hair turned around sharply at the sudden explosion next to him. Sage stands in front of Minso, who is sitting on the sofa, while a maid watches them in a room with white furniture and a blue carpet. Minso anxiously told Sage about her worries while sitting with him in the elegant room. Minseo says she's not too picky about her work as long as there's a table with a vase nearby. Sage sits thoughtfully in the room, lost in his thoughts. She sits on the couch and carefully says that the situation may cross the line of what is acceptable. She with pink hair calmly looks forward in a bright room with a column and a plant. Man in tuxedo with tattoo on face smiling calmly while sitting in elegant room. She closed her eyes and smiled, folding her hands surrounded by white flowers. Sage sits at the table, thinking that everything is very random, until someone places a tray of cups in front of him. Minso drinks from a cup on the couch, and Sage, having swallowed the drink, sits next to him and begins to talk. Sage looks forward thoughtfully, expressing seriousness and concentration. She sits on the couch and places the envelope on the table, looking focused. Sage, sitting in an elegant room, silently places his hand on the table, expressing a serious mood. He studies the document carefully, visibly agitated and tense. A man in a suit reads a letter out loud to a woman with tied-back hair and glasses who listens attentively to him. The image shows a photograph of a girl with long, wavy hair and yellow eyes attached to sheets of paper with incomprehensible text. Sage studies the documents and reflects that a powerful family in a big city cannot be controlled by one person. Sage ponders thoughtfully about a person's motives as he sits across from a pink-haired woman in a room. She looks away thoughtfully, holding a cigarette in her mouth. There are 3 people sitting on sofas in the room. A man in a suit is talking, and a girl with pink hair is listening. The third person is silent. A woman in a formal suit listens attentively to her interlocutor, who explains something with a gesture while sitting on a sofa. The image shows a large modern building against a skyline with no characters present. He sits quietly, and she with pink hair thoughtfully clasps her hands, radiating indecision and inner tension. Sage sits on the couch with a cup in his hand and asks again in surprise. Sage looks forward thoughtfully. A tattoo is visible on his face, and 3 dots appear above his head, expressing thought. Sage sips thoughtfully from his cup and muses on the need to protect the commissioner and the large audience from potential high-level assassins. Sage is worried about having to tackle such a massive problem alone. Sage takes a white mug from the table without saying a word. Sage muses that the conditions are too difficult even for him and suggests canceling for the sake of the commissioner's safety and the family's mental health. She sits with her face covered by her hand, surrounded by dark smoke, and someone nearby looks worried. Sage thinks if he cancels this, he will go broke. The image shows an angry girl with pink hair who is furiously clutching her head with her hands, expressing extreme irritation. Minseo furiously shouts that she can't help but be upset, expressing strong emotions and waving pink ribbons. A man with a tattoo on his face looks away as long pink hair flutters in front of him. Minseo looks away with a tense expression, as if preparing for an unexpected event. She sits on a rock by the water, and the text says that their lower body is that of a fish. Sage stops someone abruptly with his hand out in front of him and looks tense. Minso reflects on seeing a bathtub for the first time in the province and understands why it is in the middle of the room. Minso leaned angrily towards the seated man with the tattoo, while another man with glasses calmly watched them. Sage confirms his agreement when someone places a hand on his shoulder. Minseo stands in a wedding dress with a bouquet, and Sage sits in a bathtub with a mermaid tail, while the text explains the strategic marriages of mermaids with other species. 2 people in mourning clothes stand by a grave with umbrellas, silently grieving in a cemetery. The image shows text explaining that half-breeds are not welcome on land or in the ocean. Minseo glares at the man with the tattoo on his face, who thoughtfully replies that maybe that's true. Sage says something serious with his eyes closed, showing off his face tattoo. Minso looks away with surprise and anxiety, as if she heard something unexpected. A man wearing glasses exclaims sharply, expressing anger or surprise in a formal setting. Minso says with determination that this has been her only goal for 3 years, despite discrimination. Minso looks worried, and Sage looks at her with a tense expression. The image shows a glowing red bottle with golden patterns, radiating light and surrounded by a fiery glow. Minseo expresses anxiety and tension. Her lips are parted and her eyes are full of excitement. Sage sits on the couch in a formal suit and prepares to say something. Minso clenched her fist and asked if he had really planned this 4 years ago. Sage, wearing a formal suit and bow tie, stands indoors and looks forward with a serious expression. Sage closed his eyes thoughtfully, lost in his thoughts. The image shows an elderly man with white hair, smiling while looking away. He says it's something he can deeply relate to more than anyone else. Sage, dressed in a formal suit, sits down, looking serious and focused. Minseo looks worried and tense, with a bead of sweat appearing on her face, expressing anxiety or stress. Night, starry sky and clouds create the atmosphere at Ara Sweet's house. Minseo raises a glass of red wine against the backdrop of a night city, creating an atmosphere of celebration and coziness. A woman with long dark hair holds a glass and speaks, while a woman with black hair sits in a chair and listens with her arms crossed. A woman looks thoughtfully at a glass of red wine, holding it in her hand. She holds a glass of red wine and looks away while in a room with soft furniture. The image shows a woman with black hair smiling and thoughtfully raising her hand to her chin in a dimly lit room. A man with a tattoo on his face points forward while a girl with pink hair looks at him in surprise. Sage holds Minso's hand as she stands in a white dress while a third man watches them in an empty area. Empty rows of chairs are shown in the background, and at the bottom it says that he will send 1 or 2 talented people. The image shows a woman wearing glasses and looking away with a slight smile, creating an atmosphere of mystery and confidence. Against the backdrop of the night sky, a promise was made to send 1 or 2 talented people. A man with a tattoo on his face speaks calmly while standing between 2 people, one of whom has pink hair. Sage announces that the contract is ready. The girl with pink hair happily exclaims, "Hooray!" next to another man. Sage and Minso walk together on the cobblestone street, their footsteps echoing against the backdrop of the city at night. She smiles and admits that she couldn't go out when he wasn't there because she was afraid. Minseo smiles happily next to a silent Sage, while a scared woman is shown in the background. Sage looks away thoughtfully in a room with large windows and makes a soft sound. Sage is surprised that there are only 2 of them, watching the 2 green-hooded figures on the bridge while Minso smiles next to him. Sage, standing on a balcony at night, turns and gestures with his hand while 2 women look into the distance. 2 men lie unconscious or dead on different levels of the architectural structure, blood flowing from their heads. Sage stands on a balcony at night, watching 2 women with pink and dark hair sitting by the railing. Minseo and the man in the tuxedo walk together, and Sage follows behind them, watching with a serious expression. She, wrapping her hair in a towel, responds in surprise to the man standing in front of her. 2 women are looking intently at something in front of them. One of them makes a hand gesture expressing dissatisfaction or doubt. A man lies on the floor with his eyes open, and black liquid flows from his mouth and forehead. The image shows a woman with long wavy hair who looks away thoughtfully and begins to speak. She looks forward in surprise when someone grabs her sleeve from behind. The image shows a woman with long brown hair and yellow eyes, smiling slightly and adjusting her hair. Minso explains that she has to meet him to hire him, and he asks why. Minso offers to teach Sage to eat unfamiliar food, and he notices that her personality changes without outsiders. Sage stands next to a surprised woman with pink hair who exclaims in confusion. Minso panics as her recordings of her words are about to be exposed, while Sage and another person sit at the refreshment table. Sage eats while Minso watches him with interest at a table in an elegant setting. The image shows a young man with a tattoo on his face, sitting in a tuxedo and smiling while looking away. The door opens abruptly, but the characters in the frame are not visible. She says the food is just as delicious here, as long as the waiter stands next to her with a towel on his hand. She looks away thoughtfully, lost in her thoughts. A woman with long curly hair confidently declares that she has already paid for it, standing next to a man in a suit. Minseo is surprised that the manager went into the private room where Sage is sitting at the table with food. A man in a tuxedo bows politely while a woman with pink hair and glasses watches him with a smile and crossed arms. Minso speaks irritably at the table, and Sage listens calmly to her, sitting opposite with a plate of food. The image shows a woman with red hair and glasses smiling and letting out a soft laugh. The girl with pink hair asks in surprise if he's going to leave, and the man with long brown hair answers thoughtfully. Sage sits in a chair and says decisively that he will pay for something. She furiously declares that her bodyguard will not fall for such tricks. She looks forward with pink hair and a surprised expression on her face, as if she had just heard unexpected news. Sage and 2 others are sitting at the table, and the girl with pink hair stands up in amazement while the woman standing next to her expresses surprise. Sage smiles and invites someone to join the conversation by raising her hand. Sage laughs at the table while Minseo stands in front of him with a doubtful expression, hands on his waist. He screams with rage, expressing strong irritation against a red gradient background. A woman takes a sip from her glass, making a sound like "nee." A man calls out the name Killian Rockwood in a luxurious room with classic interiors. Woman with long curly hair opens door and smiles, thinking about something pleasant. Someone grabs the door handle abruptly, trying to open the door. The image shows a tense man with red hair, breathing heavily, clearly experiencing severe stress or fear. A woman demands to see the Wooduk brothers immediately, asking if she looks okay, while a man next to her looks worried. A man in black boots appears in the room, and 2 women in business clothes look at him in surprise. Sage confidently stated that he had been following someone from the very beginning, walking down the luxurious corridor. Minso adjusts her glasses and walks forward, followed by a man in a suit, and in front of them stands a waiter with his hands raised. 3 waiters are chatting in the dining room. One of them smiles and puts his hand on the shoulder of a girl with long red hair, while the third listens. 3 employees stand in the hallway, one of them smilingly talking about the manager as the concert begins. A woman in glasses with a serious expression is visible through the partially opening elevator doors. 3 people are standing in the corridor. One of them is speaking, but his words are not visible. Everyone is listening attentively. He smiles and looks down, and next to him you can see part of another person's head with red hair pulled back into a bun. The image shows a woman with long curly hair saying that you can contact her if you need anything, while a man with short hair stands next to her. He asks with a grin and a challenge if anyone dares to look down on him in this city. Someone threatens to show the price that will have to be paid for something. The image shows a woman with golden eyes and glasses, from whom glowing energy emanates. Sage sits in a chair, glowing energy emanating from his head, and he makes a quiet sound of surprise. Sage muses that he secretly used mana when talking to Aura Sweet, and is surprised that Wu Jin didn't notice, doubting his abilities. The image shows a text that says that birds listen at night and magicians listen during the day. Sage stands up from a table in an elegant room, leaning on the back of a chair. Sage speaks seriously to someone in a room with green walls and a classic interior. She stands in a bright room and begins to speak, but her words are not fully visible. Sage stands at the table and confirms that it can't be cancelled because there was no cancellation fee, and Minso listens to him. Sage, dressed in a tuxedo, says something serious in a room with a green wall and curtains. The image shows a man in a white robe waving against a backdrop of ancient buildings, with the caption saying his past self never even got a chance. Sage admits he knows it all too well. She, with pink hair and light eyes, looks in surprise against the golden glow. She looks away thoughtfully, expressing slight sadness and doubt. Sage looks at Minseo in the mirror's reflection, expressing slight annoyance at her behavior. The next day was the day of Marine Maria's concert, depicted against the sky in a white outfit. A man in a cap and hoodie quickly runs with a microphone in his hands past a door with a sign saying, "Cleaning." Someone said decisively that it was time to move on. A young man with purple hair sits on the toilet and looks closely at the photograph in his hand. Someone decided it was time to move on. He sits on the toilet in the bathroom and stares at a photograph of a man with dark hair. He complains of pain in his legs after waiting for a long time and muses that he should go upstairs and join Dako, remembering the room number. The character reflects on the high cost of the contract and the fact that Doko must also wear a staff uniform. He is thoughtfully thinking about what clothes the other person will wear. Sage washes his hands at the sink, looking in the mirror at his reflection with a tattoo, while someone with purple hair watches him from behind in confusion. Sage looks thoughtfully into the mirror, lost in his thoughts. The man in white notices the other man leaving, closing the door behind him, and thinks about what is happening. A man with purple hair stands in the bathroom, looking around tensely. He carefully reaches for the door handle to open the door. Sage holds a point-and-shoot camera and smiles as he talks to someone off-camera. He turned around sharply, noticing something, and sighed tensely. Sage fires a powerful beam of light from his hand, demonstrating his power. A man tries to dodge a flying projectile but realizes he can't do it. Sage fires a powerful energy blast from his hand, creating a bright flash and pink beams flying out. Sage is surprised that in front of him is not soap, but a lump of mana. A man with purple hair clutches his hand in pain and looks tense. Sage, surrounded by bright energy, silently squeezes his shoulder, remembering that he traded it for the life of an enemy. The image shows an explosion with bright red flashes and a cask sound, but no characters are visible. Sage is lying on the floor, covered in glowing pink marks, looking worried. The image shows a man with purple hair smiling and sweating while hugging himself, expressing slight tension or awkwardness. A purple-haired man said he was lucky while standing over a man in white, lying on the floor. Sage sharply raises his dagger up, preparing to attack or defend. Sage grips his knife tightly, preparing to strike as glowing pink spikes float around him. He thinks the blade is not going in and wonders what is blocking it. Sage anxiously holds a knife to the unconscious Minso's throat and notices a strange sound. The image shows the moment when the sharp blade is pointed downwards and red and blue energy beams glow around it. The image shows a scared character with purple hair against a background of red light and the words, "In his face." A man looks at a gun pointed at him with concern, sweating and feeling the tension in the room. The image shows a man with a tattoo on his face threatening another man with a gun who appears scared and is pressed to the floor. He looks up with tension and fear as a gun barrel is pressed to his throat. The sound of a blow is heard on the wall, accompanied by the splashing of a dark liquid, creating a tense atmosphere with no visible characters. He is wearing a cap and smiling and talking, and behind him the audience is holding a banner with the inscription Emma Heart RIN and looking at the stage with excitement. A young man holding a sign shouts the name Hyok, while a girl next to him clasps her hands in anticipation and excitement. She sings on stage, expressing warmth and a radiant smile in her song, like warm sunlight. The image shows a man with a long purple braid sitting, his hands folded thoughtfully, in a room with boxes. He noticed something in the dark room with surprise. He stands up from a bench in a dark room with wooden furniture and a candle in the background. He approaches the door and thinks that someone is about to leave. Sage watches a man in a white coat walk away who suddenly stops. Sage stands with his back to the long, softly lit corridor, looking forward, lost in thought. Sage stands with his back to the dark forest, his figure illuminated by dim light, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation. The image shows a young man with purple hair standing in a hallway and starting to speak, addressing someone. A man with purple hair walks down the hallway, hearing music, and looks around carefully. Sage stands in the hallway with a mysterious tattoo on his face, lost in thought. Minso asked if he was planning to retire, to which he replied that they were too young for that. He stands in the semi-darkness and sings, making long sounds, surrounded by glowing spots and notes. Sage noted with irony that there will be a duel between the assassin and the best mage in the industry, expressing his pleasure at the upcoming event. He asked with a smile what was so funny about it, surrounded by purple and black smoke. Sage is showing strength by saying that you need to be at least at this level. Sage holds a pulsating purple energy ball in his hand with concentration. Sage releases a powerful energy ball with purple flames, surrounded by dark clouds of energy. He looks up at the black smoking patch coming from the pipes in the room. Sage notices the appearance of a mystical purple orb on the wall and turns around to face it. Sage dodges an attack aimed at him, showing focus and tension. Sage warns that even a scratch from his venom will poison the enemy, and it is too late for him. The image shows a man with purple hair who begins to speak, expressing surprise or confusion. Sage refuses, explaining that he has enveloped his body in mana, blocking something around him. A man with a tattoo on his face smiles and says something in a mysterious atmosphere, surrounded by glowing particles. He smirks and states that his brother's murder was no accident, surrounded by purple energy. He is surrounded by purple flames and says that the interlocutor seems very confident. Sage activates his magical power, his eye glowing a bright blue light and surrounded by mystical symbols. Sage issues a challenge, urging Minso to try and dodge his rush attack. Sage prepares for a powerful breakthrough with concentration, gathering energy for the attack. Sage runs towards a man with a long braid who stands in the hallway, preparing for a confrontation. Sage threatens the purple-haired man who looks at him with a smirk. An ominous purple-black energy appears in the dark room, accompanied by a loud sound, but the characters are not visible. Depicted is an object from which a purple flame emanates, creating an ominous atmosphere. Sage holds his gun anxiously to the throat of a smiling purple-haired opponent, watching him tensely. Sage clenches his teeth in tension as someone grabs him by the collar. Sage looks defiantly at the other man, who smiles and moves his face closer to his. Sage grips the collar of another person's clothing in a tense situation. Sage takes a powerful punch to the stomach from a purple-haired woman who smiles as she attacks. Sage falls from a height, breaking glass and walls around him. An explosive flash illuminates a room with a metal structure, accompanied by the sounds of music and a sharp impact sound. Sage falls to the floor with the gun in his hand, making a gunshot sound. Sage stands watching as the man in the white jacket lies on the ground, shaking. He noted that none of the spectators noticed what was happening, while the audience joyfully held up glowing hearts. The image shows a close-up of the weapon's sights pointed forward, with no characters visible. The image shows a fast-moving object with a blur effect and sound. A man with purple hair smiles as he manipulates dark energy emanating from his hand. Sage holds a mystical gun in his hand, with purple light and smoke coming out of it, causing him to look surprised. Sage muses on a poison so strong it can melt not only bullets but the gun itself. He holds a purple object in his hand with a smile and says that now it's time to say goodbye. Sage clutches something in his hand with surprise and tension, expressing shock and bewilderment. Fireworks explode brightly against the night sky with loud sounds, creating a festive atmosphere. Minseo stands on stage with a microphone and encourages everyone to make noise while fireworks explode and confetti flies around. The image shows a magic spell called sound binding, accompanied by sound notes and words about what she remembered. A purple-haired man clutches his staff in panic as a vortex swirls around him. Sage, with blood on his face, experiences a powerful attack called Noise Wave that causes loud noise and bright flashes. A man with purple hair leans on a staff and holds his head, clearly in pain or weakness. Sage sits on the ground with blood on his shirt and thinks about admitting something important. The man clutches the purple staff, feeling pain and groaning. Depicts a purple energy ball moving in a dark room. The purple-haired character falls to his knees after being hit. The image shows the moment a sharp purple object is stabbed into a wall next to the tattooed man's face. Sage fires a powerful electric charge towards Minso, who covers her head with her hands in an attempt to protect herself. The man was shot in the back and tried to stay on his knees with an expression of pain. Sage is lying on the ground with blood on his clothes and says something while looking up. Sage raises his finger as he prepares for rehearsal, with a stage featuring metal structures in the background. Minso looks at the other person's raised index finger in surprise, which is probably explaining or warning something. There are cheers amid fireworks, and he says it really was enough. Sage is lying on the floor with blood on his shirt and smiling, making sounds like singing. Minseo lies on the couch and wonders if everything is really okay for the other person. Minso, sitting on the couch, says something, and Sage, in a suit, listens attentively to her, standing next to her. She was frightened when she saw that the man was unconscious and cried out in fear. Sage asks in surprise where the woman in a formal suit with a tray came from, not noticing Minso. A man with a tattoo on his face takes money out of an envelope, looking at it intently. Sage looks at the note in surprise, standing next to another man, while Minseo sits in front of them with his head down. Minso lies down and looks up in surprise, expressing bewilderment and silently accepting what is happening. Minso sits on the sofa and talks calmly, expressing a slight smile. Sage reacts with surprise and alarm to the unexpected event, a bead of sweat running down his face. Sage looks ahead thoughtfully, not saying a word. Minso smiles and makes a victory sign with 2 fingers, expressing joy or confidence. Sage tries to explain himself, and Minso sits in a chair with a displeased look, next to a silent man in a suit. Minseo looks at the 2 people who ask her a question in surprise, trying to figure out who she is. She suddenly realized the idea and said that it could be published in the newspaper. The image shows a man with a tattoo on his face smiling, wearing a tuxedo and a bow tie. Minso looks forward thoughtfully, lost in her thoughts. Minseo smiles and extends her hand to the man with tattoos on his face, who is looking at her intently. Sage walked abruptly into the room, while the other man sat quietly reading a newspaper. Woman with long blonde hair and red eyes, smiling while sitting indoors with large windows in the background. Sage reported that someone had died, and Minso, sitting on the couch with a book, listened to him. Sage reports that the newbie has also died. The image shows a close-up of a face with white hair and red eyes, with no visible dialogue or other characters. Sage steps back in surprise as moving purple tentacles appear in front of him. Minseo stopped abruptly, her hair fluttering in the wind, creating a tense atmosphere. Sage shows Minso a photo, and she, sitting with a newspaper, looks at him attentively. Someone holds up a photo of a man with dark hair and a pattern on his forehead, wearing a tuxedo and looking away. Sage asked doubtfully if that was true, and Minso, sitting on the sofa, replied that it was not, showing the newspaper. The image shows a man with long blonde hair and red eyes smiling with a slight mockery. The image shows the title of Kai Rockwood, a tattoo artist from the Purple Brigade. A man in a formal suit sits at a table and eats, moving his fork around his plate with concentration. A man in a suit stands by the window and says that even if it is a family, the situation will not change. A man with a mustache sits at a table eating and is interrupted by a young man standing behind him who apologizes. The dark-haired man explained that someone's stupidity helped them learn about the existence of a secret document, and both laugh at the table. The image shows a young man with brown hair who appears surprised or interested. The man at the table ordered that Maria be left alone, explaining that she could not be touched because of her connection with the emperor, and the servant listened to him. Sage raises a glass of red wine in a luxurious room, preparing to make a toast or start a conversation. Someone angrily asks how he dares to offend his daughter in this city. Sage and Minso sit at a table outside. He drinks from a cup and she holds a box of food, having a calm conversation. The image shows two men, one with white hair, threateningly saying that he will make someone deeply regret their actions. Sage said, "Take your time," while Minseo enjoyed his drink and replied, "Yummy." Sage sits at a table outside, smiling and rubbing her belly, enjoying the moment. Sage said the man he beat up now feels better sitting at the table with another man. Sage noticed something unexpected and was slightly surprised while standing under an umbrella indoors. Sage and Minso are sitting at a table under an umbrella, and he asks with a smile if she says no, he will still carry her away by force. Sage asks curiously about the blood tower while in a bright room. Sage thinks the other person's reaction was light-hearted, while the other person says that in this situation he should give up. Sage notes that the reward for success is 500,000 bells, and notes that this is quite a lot. He sits with his eyes closed and his arms crossed, expressing displeasure or irritation. Sage and another man sit at a table outside. He sighs, expressing fatigue or disappointment. A man with a tattoo on his face looks at his interlocutor seriously and starts talking. The image shows a man with long blonde hair and a tattoo on his forehead, looking thoughtful and serious. Sage explains that his reason for coming is more serious, sitting at a table across from another man in a cafe. Sage adjusts his scarf and begins to speak in a bright, classically decorated room. Sage confidently promised to meet later at the White Tower. He thinks about Oscar's bad character, noticing that everyone agrees with him, and expresses irritation by clenching his fist. He stands in the room, lightly clenching his hands and making a soft sound as if tapping his fingers. Sage and Minseo fist bump each other in a friendly manner while smiling in front of a building with the sign "Whiskey Special" in the background. Sage walks down the street against the backdrop of the sunset, while someone expresses concern in their thoughts. Sage stands at a pedestrian signal with a red hand and thinks about waiting until it's safe to cross the road. Sage muses out loud that if the dragon decides to hide, he doesn't know what to do. Sage feels energy of at least level 7 and is surprised by this while standing on the street next to a pedestrian traffic light. Sage mentally notes that the enemies are very strong, against the backdrop of dark trees and fire. She stands on the street, surrounded by energy that sparkles and pulsates around her, creating an atmosphere of intense power and mystery. Minso looks forward with a smile, and Sage is shocked by what he sees as cracks and black spots appear between them. On an empty street with a red tram, a stop sign for pedestrians is on, but the characters in the image are not visible. On the street in the evening, several passers-by are walking along the sidewalk. One of them is heading towards the others against the backdrop of city buildings and water towers. Sage stands in a room with people in the background, carefully observing what is happening around him. Sage and Minso are walking down the street. He notices something, and she silently looks ahead with her hands in her pockets. Sage listens intently as she, wearing a cap and glasses, talks about an important matter against the backdrop of a city street. Minso said that's not what's important now, addressing Sage against the backdrop of the evening city. Sage looks worried and says something with slight anxiety against a purple pattern. Minso, wearing a hat and glasses, smiles and says that it's just a feeling, without any basis. Sage asks Minso the man's name as they walk down the sidewalk. She is wearing dark clothes and a cap with yellow glasses, smiling, creating a mysterious and confident impression. An internal monologue is voiced, expressing excitement and hope for the future of another man. The image shows the entrance to the Tower of Blood Branch in Baran. The door slowly opens, illuminating the dark room. He said he came to find someone, addressing the woman behind the counter at the drugstore. Sage touches a wooden door, opening it. Books and a cup are visible in the background. Sage walks thoughtfully around the room, pondering Edna's blood data. Sage and Minso make finger gestures to each other while intently interacting with an invisible object between them. She holds a small insect on her finger on a light green background. The image shows a bottle of artificial dragon blood, made from the speaker's blood, against a background of molecular structures and cells. The image shows a visualization of DNA and blood with text stating that it is possible to change the components and structure of Edna's blood, even if the dragon blood effect is not present. Sage holds the bottle and smiles, showing the contents while explaining something. In a pharmacy, a woman wearing glasses reacts in surprise to a sharp movement of a hand that knocks over bottles of liquid on the table. The woman quickly approaches the man and hands him a piece of paper, getting his attention. A man looks at a woman in surprise as she shows him a document explaining something important. It holds a menu describing the different levels of surveillance, including speed and area coverage. Sage asked again in surprise, not having heard what was said. Sage listens intently as someone reads a document while holding it in front of him. The image shows a woman wearing glasses with reflective lenses who appears surprised or worried. Sage, with a smile on his face, demands to do something immediately, calling it a lie. Woman with red hair sighs in relief with hand on chest in room with boxes. Sage is silent, visibly embarrassed and tense, at a loss for words. Sage, embarrassedly covering his chest with his hand, stands by the shelf with jars, and it seems that he is trying to explain or justify himself. Sage looks stunned, and a sign with the number 150 appears above his head, expressing surprise or shock. The man handed the letter to the woman with glasses, who responded in surprise that it had arrived. The woman handed the man an envelope and told him to look at the documents while she continued working at her desk. Sage looks worried and sweats as he stands in a gloomy room with lion carvings on the walls. Sage knocks on the door with force, causing a loud sound. The image shows a man with long blonde hair and facial tattoos, looking surprised and worried. Sage breathes heavily, resting her hands on her knees, standing against the wall with the window. Sage blinks hard and sweats, indicating anxiety or fatigue. The image shows a young man with short blonde hair against a backdrop of stained glass windows, looking forward and smiling. The scene ends with the words, "To be continued."